Okay, it's episode 49 of Summoning Insight. I've been out there to Los Angeles, La La Land, Monte, near Hollywood, and you know the secret to having integrity, Monte, is that it's actually something that everyone says they want, Monte. They say everyone claims they want to have integrity, right? But the real secret to integrity is because it's such a valuable commodity. Well, in this world that we live in, Monte, the whole point of valuable commodities is to sell them at their highest price. So I waited a good sort of 14, 15 years. I was out there. I could never be bought at any price, Monte. I was the guy who, listen, I did it for the love of it. I just did it because I wanted to achieve something, to do something meaningful, something tangible in this life, to express myself, to get by, to have a crust of bread here and there, some water to drink from, to keep my soul nourished so that the body could continue and the spirit was willing, Monty. And then what I did was, then I had like a free auction that took place in a private sort of pit, and these shadowy figures came forth, and I had them bid on my soul. And in fact, there was some sort of creature was stood there with sort of like in the Egyptian afterlife where they weigh your heart against feathers to see like the weight of the soul, And actually, because I'd built up this incredible cachet, it seemed like I was the guy who couldn't be bought. That also forced people to bid higher and higher, and thinking that I would never accept any offer, they allowed themselves it almost became a challenge for them. Could they buy the man who would never sell the world? And then actually, I've got to admit, they put up some really nice figures. So eventually, like a smart businessman, I cashed in completely. And oh wait a second, I'm just getting a call on my HTC. No, actually, that part I haven't gone to that level quite yet, but I just went to LA to do some interviews, and also, that's the great excuse, Monty. I was like, oh, I guess I'll just have to come to LA and sneak in the back door and get all those Cloud9 interviews. I guess what you could say, Monty, is if I was Nocturne, I guess you could say I farmed a lot of creeps when I was in LA. See what I did there?
So does this mean that by selling your soul that you finally got Medios to bury the hatchet off of your offensive tweets that prevented you from actually interviewing the members of Cloud9?
By offensive tweets, you mean a tweet to St. Vicious that said ha 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 ILY. I know wars have been started over Les Monty, bar fights. I realized I should probably issue an apology for my incredibly offensive behavior. See, actually, Monty, what's great is, of all the things that I've been told I was unprofessional over, that's got to be like the most innocuous, least offensive thing. I say things more offensive than that, like in every single segment of this show, Monty.
So in contrast, in answer to my question.
Well, here's the thing.
Has the hatchet been buried between you and Medios? The fans, Duncan, they want to know.
I don't know whether the hatchet's been buried. Like, there was never really a hatchet from my side. It's more like I offered him a drink of water and it balanced out all that salt. And now he's just a well-hydrated, electrolytically balanced young man who is a world-class jungler. Well, okay, let's not go that far. It didn't go quite that well, Monty. He's a good jungler. He's a good NA jungler. Okay. No, here's the thing. Here's the real secret, Monty, if you think about it, is that, HTC, Cloud9, they won the bidding auction. They got to buy that soul that was worth so much, Monty. But actually, one of my favorite comic books, a classic in the genre, is in the comic book Hellblazer, which is about John Constantine, who's kind of a wheeling dealing magician. It's a DC Comics Vertigo production, and he's a guy where he kind of has the gift of the gab, and he knows a bit of magic and has a bit of nous about him. There's a really classic book called, I think it's called like Dangerous Habits, and in this one he actually manages to win out in a desperate situation. By what he does is he summons all the different lords of hell. There's three to four different lords of hell who have different dominions. And the secret is he summons them all separately and agrees to sell his soul to each of them separately. So they all do it. Therefore, actually, when one of them comes to claim it, like they all come at once, and then there's like a war between them, and the only way they can agree to sort of like not tear hell apart is to just agree like none of them will take his soul. So he's actually beaten them. That's what I actually did, Monty. This is what people didn't realize, okay? Because not a lot of people probably kept track, but I'd already sold my soul to Alpha Draft before I sold to HTC. So actually, they didn't know it, but there was no soul left to give, Monty. Like you can't grow a new soul within 1 week. As I know you found out, like every time you come back from those Riot events like Worlds and All Stars, you have to like, you're sort of bedridden for a while. They have to put like IV and fluids back into you. Someone has to come and whisper like Gaelic poetry into your ears, and kind of that. Eventually, they coax forth that soul again after you've kind of like fed the flyers.
Well, the nice thing about living in Korea is there are actually a very high number of shamans. So it's actually very easy once your soul departs for a while for you to just go to a shaman here in Korea, and they will usher it back into your body. So considering you're going to be in Korea the next couple of weeks, we can go see one together, and maybe this process will be a little bit easier for you.
Yeah. If it works out, I've got a plan. When Dade finally finishes his play in China, I think we need to desperately take him on money, because he literally sold his soul for money, and I don't even know what's going on there. He's just like, he literally is a shadow of his former self. He's nothing now. He is a shell that it was Dade. He's not even the king of spring anymore, money. That nickname earned over a whole 2 springs no longer even works. Believe it or not, it doesn't have to happen every time. But don't worry, I'm pretty sure Uzi will go to the finals of Worlds this year. That one will never be broken, okay? All the records are there.
Wow. OMG, the big return, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's get into this. So we'll start in everyone's favourite region. Actually, it probably is the best Western region at the moment, just to even watch, which is Europe. Because in Europe, the reason why the games are actually... I mean, there have been stomps, but the reason why in theory on paper they're interesting is because the level of competition in sort of the middle pack is fairly broad, and like some of the teams who people still think might be top 5, top 6 teams are actually 7th, 8th, 9th, that sort of position. Whereas in NA at the moment, there's a few teams at the top and then a whole bunch at the bottom. So I think the spread is a little bit better in Europe at the moment. But with that said, there are 2 teams who have yet to lose.
Which is counterintuitive, because after the 2 weeks of play, the rankings in NA actually have teams that are 2-2, whereas in the EULCS, no one is 2-2. It's 1-3 and 3-1. Nobody with a 50% record.
Yeah, but there are 2 teams who've yet to lose, Monty. So there's Fnatic, this team that recently had a very good international placing. They made it to the semi-finals of a big tournament. They have a pretty skilled mid laner who's good on assassins. They have a top laner who's kind of a unique style that he makes work. And then there's old Fnatic who have a guy called Expeke who's a mid laner, and they have a guy called Soza. It's like the same shit all over again. Like what's going on here, Monty? Why do you think these 2 teams... Do these 2 teams actually have any similarities, first of all? Does the new Fnatic have any similarities to Origin?
I don't know how many similarities they have. I guess I see a lot more. The veteran status obviously is much bigger in Origin as opposed to Fnatic, because they've got 4 players who were pretty new, except for, well, Reignover was around for a while but never really performing at a high level. So still on the order of like a bunch of rookies. Of course, now they have Reckless, so there's that aspect of it, and certainly. I think you see some similarities in play style, but Origin, I think, is a very interesting team in and of that they have a lot of veteran, strong individual talent. And then Niels, this new AD carry who's been performing well, not really sure how great he is yet. He seems solid, but he's got such a cast of performers around him that I think it's hard to get a good read on his individual performance yet. And I think that there are some similarities that could be drawn, but I'm not even really sure that I have a very firm grasp on Origin's playstyle yet, just because the games have been pretty one-sided for them. I do think that they're not perhaps as aggressive as they could be in terms of closing. Their games tend to be pretty high kill, but it just seems they're running away with everything right now.
Since the 2 both have undefeated records, how close do you think they are at the moment? Like, is Fnatic the best team?
I'm not sure at the moment. I'm actually not sure. The interesting thing, the change that I see this season in Fnatic as opposed to last season is it looks to me like they're really trying to diversify their strategies. And a big change, I mean, we've talked about this, but is that Huni's now taking more, he's not coming in, and yes, he's had a lot of Rumble bans still. He's had a lot of Hecarim bans in some of these games, which is preventing him from playing a lot of the same style of carry top laners that he was last season. But instead of then kind of going into that top Vladimir mode or whatever, he's been going on some tanks. Like we've seen a couple Gnar games in the last week where it's not so much about Huni carrying the game. They're putting more stock, they're putting more farm into Reckless in comparison, and Huni is sort of transitioning into being more of that big tanky top laner and adding some versatility. So this seems to be an experiment that's working well for them. Obviously, Reckless's performances have been very good.
So, obviously, people would say after MSI, like, you know, don't fuck around with anything. If obviously they changed Steelback, so that's out the window immediately. But in theory, don't change the playing style. Like the playing style was what was working for them. Do you think they would have had to change the playing style anyway with like the new set of teams and the changing meta? Would that playing style still be effective now?
I think it would still be effective now. It's just a change in priority. And we've discussed this in terms of why, like, Reckless is a player who is capable of doing a lot with a little. Yet he is being given a lot more farm now. We don't really see Huni getting those, like, crossing that flame horizon, being there with that 100 CS advantage over the enemy top laner to the same degree this season. Granted, it's still a very young season so far, right? And he is now obviously playing that Rise as well. So there's a different carry threat from the top lane, but I'm waiting to see. My big question for Fnatic is, because Huni's had the Rumble and Hecarim banned in every single game that Fnatic has played so far, what happens when he goes back to one of those picks? Will he get that big farm advantage once again? We do see him with, you know, CS leads, obviously. He's a world-class top laner. He's very good. But will they actually pick those champions? Are those champions even priorities for them anymore when protecting Reckless and giving him that empty lane?
Oh dear. Oh, you're back again. It's okay,
back.
Just keep rolling. You lagged for a second, but I didn't pause. I didn't stop. So you were talking about giving the empty lane farm to Reckless, and that's when it cut off. So keep going.
Oh yeah, just giving it. What happens when the Hecarim is back again, and he really does demand a lot more farm on some of these champions? Is that's when we're going to see whether or not Fnatic even prioritizes these picks anymore, or whether they're trying to change their playstyle to be more Febiven and Reckless focused as opposed to Huni and Febiven focused.
In terms of, you mentioned Rise there. So everyone has kind of jumped on the bandwagon that Rise is like super OP, super broken. Supposedly there's already nerfs even coming in now. Is it broken enough where every team should try and get it if they have a star top laner?
Yes. Even if they don't have a star top laner, you need to ban it or first pick it. It's incredibly strong right now. I was casting a game earlier today where some days Rise was down in kills. Smeb was 2-0-2 with an 8-minute Abyssal Scepter after a really bad team fight that KT took, and some days Rise was 1-2, and even at 8 minutes with an Abyssal Scepter on Smeb's Rumble, he was nearly 1v1 killed by Someday.
No, listen, Monte, you sold me. As soon as you said that Someday was playing it, and then you said against Smeb, I was like, I'm sold. You had me at Someday. So,
well, there you
go. Well, here's the problem, Monte. Almost every game I have seen a Rise play in competitive so far, I'm pretty sure that they've won almost every one. But you know, there's one that I do remember that they've played Rise top, didn't win. Cloud9. That's a shame, wasn't it? I think it was the game where he had Victor mid lane and Rise top. But we'll get to that in the NA section.
I'm sure you'll have lots of fascinating insights about Cloud9 for us, won't you?
Maybe I will. But I won't sell all of my trade secrets. It's like the recipe to Coca-Cola, Monte. You have to actually enjoy the finished product. So I'll give you a taste.
You're going to tantalize me on Summoning Insight.
Exactly. So one of the strange things in Europe is we have these 3 teams who are tied for 3rd place right now. Now 2 of them, it's no problem. So we've got H2K, yeah, no problem there, 3rd best team last season. Unicorns of Love, placed 2nd. See what I did there? And the other team is Giants Gaming. Now, Unicorns of Love, I feel like I just was too harsh to you there, because now we've got Giants Gaming is in the top 5. So what do you make of Giants Gaming being 3-1 after the first 4? Maybe something. Maybe they've just, listen, Monte. You know how every fan of every team, this is the way they keep themselves going. So when there's been no roster change, they say, right, yeah, well, the first split, we were just getting used to the league, and they just had to sort of like check where their heads were at, get their practice going. But now that they're going to improve and build upon what they've learned, and in the second split they're going to get a lot better, which nearly almost never happens. Actually, it's very rare that teams actually take like a significant step up the next split. Is this going to be an outlier? Do you think the Giants have kind of cracked something? Is something about their style solidified?
So let's talk about this. Giants Gaming, out of the teams you just named, has not played Fnatic. They have not played H2K. They have not played Unicorns of Love. The only other team that is currently within the top 5 that they have played is Origin, and they lost. Otherwise, their wins are, let me look, Elements,
Copenhagen Wolves, and SK Gaming.
I don't think that we know enough about Giants Gaming to say how good they are, given the quality of the wins that they have had right now. In my mind, there's been a pretty big rift opening up in Europe. I'm not sure that teams like Gambit, given their start, teams like SK, given their start, teams like Elements, they really look not very well put together right now. Roccat may have, I think, a small hope of escaping the black hole, but I think that there's a pretty big distinction between the teams right now that are 3-1 and 1-3. Out of the first 2 weeks of play, those teams have really been pretty big letdowns. So I'm not sure that Giants is actually going to stay at this 3-1 record, because once they start to fight with the top 3 teams, they may just go down to 50% or approximately thereof.
So then wouldn't you say something similar about Unicorns of Love, being as their wins are Copenhagen Wolves, Elements, and Roccat?
You're right. I would say something like that.
What do you expect from them?
I think that they're not going to have as much success as they did last season, especially because when we're thinking about the top teams, it just seems to me that Fnatic and H2K and Origin are kind of head and shoulders above, just in terms of the team play, especially that we've seen from H2K. You could say the same thing about H2K too. I mean, their wins are against Roccat, Elements, and Gambit, but H2K has a safeness and technicality to their play that I think is more immune to large differences between their wins and their losses.
What do you mean by a safeness?
I think they play a more calculated style of League of Legends, lower risk. When they get a lead, they tend to close out extremely quickly. Their last 2 wins were 30 minutes or under. So I think that that shows that when they have a lead, they're very good at snowballing it. They don't need 1 billion kills like Origin does to actually close a game. And that's my concern about Origin, is I can see the individual talent there. But some of their games, I mean, do we really need a 14-1 and 18 Urgot to close against SK Gaming? I don't think so.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the style, Monte. Like, if it's an Origin game, if Soaz gets like 2 or 3 kills, he's like, well, why would I end the game now? This is awesome. I'm shitting on this guy. Like, this is when I get more kills. Like, back into lane I go, boys, with like more damage items.
I just see an SK a high caliber of play as a team. Whatever.
I think that's a pretty fucking significant distinction to make right now, bro. Oh, in SK, I see a pretty high level of team play and strategy. They close games out in a very clean and crisp manner. Candy Panda is a revelation. The young man in his rookie split in 2015. So, explain this to me then, Monte. If they're such a good team, and I admit I watched them play, and I think they're awesome as well. What stops them from being the best team in Europe?
I think that they, to a certain degree, lack some individual playmaking abilities.
Also doesn't really help that, like, one of the best players speaks Korean and the rest of them don't. That's the best way to say it, I think.
I don't know what Ryu's communications within the team are like, but...
So, one of the teams who it feels like have a deceptively bad record is Copenhagen Wolves. Because, okay, so Copenhagen Wolves, we've just heard before. I mean, people are already going to say we're doing some like Jack Dilemma shit here, but okay, they've lost to Unicorns of Love and Giants. We did kind of just say they aren't such good teams. But what do you make of Copenhagen Wolves, Monte? Because it feels like I feel like they should be a little bit better than they are, but we have, like I just mentioned, they did just lose to two teams that I don't think are particularly that great. They're just okay teams. So what do you make of them?
I mean, I think that they're not quite as good as you believe them to be. They just seem to be getting outplayed a lot and not have a lot of pressure or presence on the map. Airwax has had some not so great jungle games as well. I haven't seen all of their games, but I've seen a couple, and that was my initial impressions. But I don't really have that thorough of an opinion on the Wolves, because I as a team that isn't really in the upper sphere in terms of the rankings right now, and they haven't had very interesting games, I haven't been paying attention to them as closely.
Do you have faith that Elements will turn it around? It's okay to just say it's over for them. It's done. I mean, here's the thing. I know people always want to say when you have a new roster, like, oh, it takes time to gel and you have to figure things out and all the rest of it. Yeah, it does for a lot of teams, but if we're honest, the teams that end up being really good, it doesn't really tend to take them that long. Like, they might be a little bit rough around the edges, but they tend to get it rolling fairly soon, you know. And so I think it's pretty worrying that Elements has had another bad start, and this is with a whole bunch of new players.
Why? I mean, and that's at a certain point you have to stop making excuses. And why is Origin able to come into this league and look so very dominant right off the bat after rolling through the challenger scene in Europe, but Elements can't put together a season at all this year after being so successful with that alliance? I think there's something going on within the team. I don't know if it's a lack of motivation or not good shot calling or what's happening right now inside of that team, but it just doesn't look like they want to win.
Like, the problem when I look at the Elements lineup is that, here's the thing, the Elements that had Reckless on it after IEM San Jose that came into LCS Spring, I don't think it's unreasonable to look at that lineup and go, oh, this lineup could be one of the top three teams, like we did say, because you looked at, they had all the same players as had just had that really dominant split. Then they'd had the bad one-off IEM, but okay, now they had Reckless, and he actually was one of the bright spots of the IEM. He actually had some good games, so they at least had the talent. They still had Shook, who could be, okay, yes, he's very up and down, but he could have phenomenal games. They still had, well, obviously Froggen at the time was still having some good games early on, and not what games they were winning, admittedly. But the thing is, you look at this Elements now, Monte, and if we're being realistic, you have to look at the roster, and you look and you see, okay, so they've got JWoww, who's never particularly done anything in LCS. He's been in LCS, didn't do very much. Was in the Challenger scene, didn't do very much. His only real hype is still based on the idea that he was one of the original Super Team members to come on this team like 2 years ago. Then you add in, who's the other new guy, Promiscu, and I don't know anything about this guy. And watching the games,
anything about him.
Haven't seen anything yet to say that he's going to be awesome, whatever. So there's 2 players out of the 5 already, Monte, that we have no reason to think are going to be awesome. Then you look at the other 2 players who've been added into the mix, okay? So yes, Tabs used to be a wonderful AD carry in Europe. That was quite a while ago. We haven't seen Tabs since the end of the summer, basically. Well, since Worlds, basically. And you could say in terms of Worlds, he didn't play that well there. So we haven't really seen a good tab since summer of last year. Then add in Dexter. It feels like forever since you last saw Dexter. And so even two of the names that you think could be good, well, they haven't been in much form. They haven't been playing games. So then you've got one name left, which is Froggen. And Froggen had the worst split of his whole career last time, where even games he would... Here's the thing that was different about Froggen's good games last split. Even the games that statistically were good, some of them, he didn't actually have an impact on the game. Like, he had some where he did actually lose, and they weren't necessarily his fault, but he had some games where he had a great scoreline, but you look at the actual game and it's like, he couldn't have an impact on the game with it. Like, none of those kills were going to win the game for them, or turn a game, I mean, what do you think when you look at this lineup?
I think that what this team needed after all of the changes that they made, and I think that one of Alliance's main problems, even when they were doing well, is that they lacked someone that we could really point to and say, this guy is a great shot caller. And what Alliance didn't bring in any of these players is a person who we think of as a great shot caller. I mean, what are we supposed to do with that, really, is my question. And what was the plan there? Just develop a shot caller out of thin air? I mean,
it's confusing to me. Here's the thing. This is the same scenario that's been the whole CLG story for all these splits. It's this idea that, shot calling is always your major problem. Even when things are going well, it's shot calling. When things break down, it's shot calling. It's like, what's your first priority in the off-season, guys? Just recruit a player. Gonna get a shot caller? No, why would you do that? It's easy to build shot callers. Have you ever done it? Nah, we've never figured it out. Better luck this time. Elements haven't done it either. Think about, there's players out there. In fact, let me try and think. Who is there out there who's done some shot calling who in Europe could have been recruited?
I guess I don't really have a lot of knowledge because I don't spend very much time with the European players, or haven't in the past compared to NA players, as to who the big shot calling names are out of Europe. I guess I don't really know the answer to that question. I mean, I know Yellowstar is a big time shot caller. I think probably Forgiven did a lot of it when he was on SK. Because of the way that he plays, he kind of has to be the shot caller.
True. Presumably in SK Gaming, they must have someone who's good. Yeah, that's the thing. It is hard to see who they would. The problem is, if I were them, I would go crazy and I would just try and I would even if it's a huge gamble. Bearing in mind you've got tabs, I would have actually just took the blank checkbook and be like, Mithy, join us, man. Reunite the 11 dog spot lane. You could be the shot caller for the whole team. Or even
Mithy, getting Mithy for Origin, I think, was a real big coup for them.
I mean, people can think this is a joke, but I'd even go to someone like N-rated because at least he has the tenure. At least he has history that's behind his name. Remember, you are Elements at this point in time. After that bad split, you're not going to be able to get anyone you want necessarily. It's going to be hard at that point. Same problem CLG have, which is you always think you should be getting good players, but a lot of those good players tend to say no to those offers when you ask them to join you.
Yep.
I don't know. The problem with this Elements lineup right now is I have no reason to think they will turn it around. As far as I can tell, if everything went great, so let's say Dexter and Tabs return to the peak of their old form, and Froggen plays a very consistent game. He's been reasonably consistent statistically again. Let's say all that goes great. I don't see how that would elevate them to a top 3 team. But surely they would be like a 4, 5, or 6 team, around with sort of the Unicorns of Love type teams in that realm.
It just amazes me about Elements that even when they were at their peak, they haven't been able to ever really find another star level player to be with Froggen. And even when they found Reckless, it did seem sort of like a wash in terms of what that team needed. Because if we think about old Alliance and we look at a player like Froggen, and then we say, well, who else is the playmaker on this team? Well, it was, I guess, sort of Tabs. Shook in 33% of the games was able to come up with something really wonderful. But where else was it coming from? You know what I mean?
Yep. That's
so
why.
What is, and Reckless isn't exactly the big playmaker. He's a very he's not a bad player. He's very reliable. He's very consistent, and he's good at what he does. But is he going to be the guy who makes the crazy play that wins you the game? No, that guy's Hooney, right? That guy's Febvin. Where is the other threat that's ever really been on the Alliance roster that you're like, oh shit, I have to take a step back because Forgiven might ruin my fucking day right now?
Yeah, here's the thing. Obviously, it's easy to say, let's take Forgiven from Gambit and put him onto another team now because Gambit's doing terribly. But actually, when you think about it, I realize players might not like Forgiven, but that would have been a good gamble for both teams to put someone like Forgiven onto Elements.
I understand why they went back to Tabs, though, right?
I think Tabs individually has an upside. The problem I see there is, okay, again, what's the best case scenario? We've put Tabs onto a worse version of Alliance, where you already had him at the best version of Alliance, and apparently that wasn't good enough, so I don't really know what the best case scenario is here. And also, the problem with Tabs, remember, this is what drives me crazy about the Elements team now. The problem before was the notion that what made Tabs not so comfortable is that Nif was too defensive or passive a support for him, and he wanted an aggressive Yellow Star type support. Did they get that? If they did, then I'm unaware of it. Maybe actually, I think I've nailed it, Monty. I've nailed the biggest problem a lot of these top teams have, which is when me and you sit down and we scout out like who could they recruit here or who would be good for the next split to recruit. We're going to look at real names where we kind of have an idea of what this person would give us and what their strengths are. As far as I can tell, Western pro gamers just play with people. In 2015, they play duo queue with people, and after 5 really good games, they're like, this is the guy, sign him up, let me just hitch my whole career to this guy. And then if it doesn't work out, it's like, well, he had really awesome scrims. Like, I don't understand it, man. Like, top teams don't do this in sports.
I don't think that when pro players try and take a look at what the needs of the team are, that they are actively considering fit beyond like, is this guy good? They don't sit down enough and say, well, what is the upside here to this guy? What does he bring to the team? What do we need as an organization in order for this team to be successful? Because sometimes you don't need a flashy player. Sometimes you just need that workhorse. That's it. That's all you need.
This is where I feel like we're still lacking a role in League of Legends. So, okay, we've got coaches now. We've got analysts. This is where in American sports, you literally have a third role. You have general manager. And his job is to manage like the talent in the team, to keep like figuring out which star am I going to hitch this team to going forwards for years from now. Like if I'm only going to have this guy for the next split, then maybe he knows it up front, and I'm already telling him like play well now, and we'll go with someone else. Which young people are we going to sort through? And okay, what are we missing from last split? And but obviously,
it should be the team owners who's doing that, and who is legitimately very good at that is Reginald. He was
in terms of identifying what they need.
In terms of identifying what they need, and identifying Bjergsen very early on as a good fit for the organization. When things start to falter, like they did with Glebe, not saying that Reginald hasn't had some mistakes, but he hasn't had very many. That we can look at him and he'll make that change, and he'll bring in a veteran like Lustboy and make it work with the team. And I think that there are teams that have identified that talent very well. Some teams have identified that talent very poorly. Look at what happened with Fnatic too.
Well, that's the best example I think you'll ever see of someone building up a team. And I have to figure, listen, I'll give them props. Like, first of all, I think that clearly shows that Yellowstar has some sort of insane eye for who to pick and all that stuff. But even so, I don't believe he could have known that it would go quite as well as it did. I don't think if he had could have known. I don't think he knew that every single player would like that, and definitely not the interaction. Like, I don't care how many scrims you played. No one knew that in real LCS games, Rainova would be some super combo with Hooney, a guy who's never played a competitive game before, and dominate Europe.
True.
See, the only upside of all these shit teams is that hopefully, when they don't qualify for Worlds, teams like Elements, Roccat, Gambit, SK Gaming, which has a whole bunch of good players within that mix, like finally get their shit together, change some players around, and make a good 1 or 2 teams out of that mix of players. Because it doesn't make sense to me that of all those bottom teams, we've got names like this, Monty. Jankos, Nukduk, Vanda, Forgiven, Diamond Prox, Svenskeren, Freddy122. We've got all these names, and none of these are playing for a team that's likely to finish top 4 this season. There's something wrong there.
Freddy is not having a good year. He's not the same player that we saw last year, in my mind. Unfortunately, because I thought he was probably the best top laner in Europe last year. But he just hasn't been there. Yeah.
But that's the problem. You think of some of the names I've mentioned there, and even on these bad teams, some of those names, it's hard to put players who are at their position on some of the teams above them, ahead of them. Like, it's hard to look at teams like Unicorns of Love, Giants, and Copenhagen Wolves and go, oh, these players are definitely better than the names I just mentioned, even though the teams are winning. So I feel like Europe at the moment is really people say in NA, their problem is that the bottom teams don't have enough talent, or all the top it's top heavy. In Europe, they totally mismanage their talent at the moment, in this split, I think.
I would agree with you. I think there is a lot of talent to be... If the teams were really... I think that there's a way to make probably, maybe not 10 good teams, but 7.
Okay.
With a rearrangement of the talent. And sure, the bottom 3 teams would be pretty bad, but I don't... And people say, well, you could do that in NA too. I don't think you can do that in NA. No. I don't think you could do that in NA at all.
Now, one of the weirdest ones to me is still Roccat. Because, I mean, first of all, they didn't make enough changes. I could have told you that before the split had started. But the thing you were still hoping on Roccat is that Nukduk's going to have some change of heart. Now, what's funny is I've noticed, I made a tweet like this about this, but the disparity between what the public consensus on Nukduk is and what high-level European mids will today, if you spoke to them privately, tell you about Nukduk, is a massive chasm that at the moment, I admit, the LCS performance means that you can't actually bridge. Because what happens is, you look at Nukduk in the games. Now, admittedly, in this split, he has had a few better games. But you look at him in 2015 in official LCS games, and he just looks like an average mid laner in Europe. In fact, he looks like a guy who sometimes... If he'd never played before, if he was like Incarnation, I'd say he looks a bit scared, a bit tentative. Maybe he's not cut out to be an LCS mid laner. And if people told me all that stuff, like, no, he has lots of talent, so I'd go, yeah, but where is it, Now, if I talk to pros, and I did this recently as well, like I was speaking Incarnation, none of them will tell you, even privately, off the record, none of them will go like, oh no, he's actually shit, like, he doesn't care about the game anymore, he doesn't care about, he only cares about money, or he's just not that good. None of them will ever say like, oh, he's actually just overrated, he was only good in 2013. All of them say, no, he's the guy in solo queue who like tears me up, he gives me the most problems, he's super aggressive, he's still really, really good, like in scrims he's amazing. But he's the guy in LCS games who's just, at the moment, it's not transitioning enough. With that said, have you seen any signs of life?
I think I have, and that's why I was talking about Roccat earlier as a team that may be able to do something. They had a very close game versus Unicorns of Love in the past week that really stretched out. I still think Roccat has like some pretty intense problems in terms of closing games, but they've made it competitive more so than other teams against teams like Fnatic and Unicorns of Love. And also, Rockat's schedule has been pretty fucking hard. Their losses have been to H2K, Unicorns of Love, and Fnatic, and some of these were very close games.
So here's the thing about Nukduk, Monte, because I actually do feel like at the moment, he still can maybe turn this around. I don't know if he's ever going to be this, what they're describing in solo queue, but I have seen some games. Now, here's the backstory, Monty. I have an interesting way of analysing players where sometimes I can look at their flaws, and their flaws actually make me think, wow, this guy's going to be really good, or this guy is really good, in a way that other people probably wouldn't take that interpretation. So one of the classic flaws of Nukduk is his arrogance, his hubris to think that he is the best, okay? In the past, at least. So if you remember the famous examples, there's 2 great ones that we all know the story of, but for newer viewers, I'll give you the backstory, okay? So at Season 3 Worlds, Nukduk had his LCS rookie season, and he'd had a wonderful season, he'd been very strong on the Assassins in Europe. He comes into the World Championship, and he plays against Faker, and at the time, okay, Faker hadn't won Worlds, but he's just won OGN. He just did the Z outplay like weeks before. I guess it probably like a month before. He'd already had some crazy individual games where everyone already was kind of like, Faker's fucking amazing, this guy's like the best player in the whole world. So I've no doubt Nuke Duck knew about that and had heard about it, right? But he went against him, and if for anyone who doesn't know, he let Faker have Ahri, and then he said to himself, right, well, in solo queue, in EU West, Swain is a counter to Ahri, and I've played Swain a couple of times in scrims. Therefore, I'll let the best player in the world, by the way, very good on Ahri, have Ahri, and I'll play the counterplay to Scrubs in solo queue, and I'll beat him doing that, and everyone will probably just say, wow, this Faker guy is pretty good, but I guess Nuke Duck's better. That's how he actually thought that game would play out, okay? Another example, he gave a team, TSM, who played entirely around their mid laner, but a mid laner who didn't even want to play anymore, and who was only really good on one champion, Zed, which at the time was one of the most strong broken champions. He thought, fuck it, just give him that champion. I'll beat him anyway. Like, this is a huge flaw, okay, Monte? If you're listening, you should be like, well, that's stupid. What is this guy doing? No, that is awesome, because that tells me that this guy was so ridiculously confident in his own skills that he was like, I actually probably am secretly the best player in the whole world. Everyone else just doesn't know it yet. Now, the reason why I tell this story is because that's the Nuke Duck I want to see now, even if he fails. I want to see the guy who's going to go all out, who's going to pick stuff like that, who's going to pick a champion just because he thinks he'll body on it, even if the other guy's a strong champion. Now, the reason I bring that story up, Monte, is that's the sort of flashes of life that I have seen even in the games they lost, because he's doing this. Did you see, Monte, where he played Varus? He played Irelia like one day after Faker played Irelia and bodied with it. So I like to imagine that some of the old Nuke Ducks coming back, okay, after the rehabilitation in the Riot facility, you know, and everyone, you know, you thought that like he'd been healed, like he was like a karma guy, he was just playing with he wasn't raging at his teammates anymore, but every now and then he'd hear sort of a laugh in the back of his mind, like, ha 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 ha, I'm still evil. Who was that? What was that? No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm a new person now. It's all over. It's all changed now. And then he'd just hear that voice in the back of his head in Champs like Faker played it. Why don't you play it? Who is that? Who is that? It's like, it's me. And then he's like, fuck it. If Faker can play it, then you know what? Unlike everyone else who was like, wow, Faker's amazing. He can even play Aurelia mid and body everyone. Nuke Duck was like, nah, I reckon that must just be a broken champion if Faker's using it, so I'll play it. And if you saw the Aurelia game, wasn't that pretty good?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the pick, but it was okay.
So actually, that might be one of the few teams in the bottom one where I think you could... I wouldn't say you can have hope for them, but that's... Whereas on the Elements one, I outlined like where is the reason to think they'll be really good. The Roccat one, okay, if things go really well...
Can they like get another 80 carry? I mean, there has to be someone.
I feel like they won't. I don't know why. I don't know. I mean,
I'm sorry, like 80 carries... You could just get somebody just a little bit safer. I think if you're on Roccat, speaking of team identity... You can have a player like Nuke Duck and a player like Yonkos who are going to make the plays for you. Do you really need... Can't you just find some solo queue, high elo 80 carry who could position a little bit more conservatively?
Let me ask you a crazy question that you won't even believe it when I ask you this question. Are you ready?
Oh, God.
Why didn't Roccat recruit Steelback?
I mean, I can understand why.
Did I go too far there? Did I go too far, Monty? Okay. I retract the question. Don't answer that. That was supposed to be rhetorical. Let us never speak of it again. By the way, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but have you noticed how no one was falling over themselves to pick up Steelback? It's not like we just hate Fnatic, and that's why we say Steelback wasn't that good. No one thinks he's good. As in, where are the other Western players like, hey, don't say that about Steelback. I happen to know he's a phenomenal player. They don't exist, by the way. Like, even people who are Steelback's friend are like, wow, man, congrats. He's like, what do you mean I just got kicked out for Fnatic? No, how did he get away with that for so long? I mean, you're even almost in the final like MSI and shit. Like, what do you mean? I was a good player. Like, well, enjoy NA Challenge. And then, well, actually, you won't be. You didn't even get an NA Challenge, but enough about that. Do you think there's any chance Gambit can turn it around? Please say it. It's so, Monty. Can it work?
I would be surprised.
I think I might have a sickness when it comes to Gambit. Because it's like I'm like a gambler, Monty. I keep looking at the team. It's failed me so many times. It's been terrible in every possible sense. There's no way Forgiven's going to change his style of play. As in, even when he literally changed his champion pool to be what is theory the meta, he still didn't play it like the champion is supposed to be played. Like, it's like, it won't change, but I'm so sick that I still feel like he could still do it, though. I haven't given up yet. I'm just like that. I'm wishing on a star. I'm thinking about tomorrow, Monty.
God bless. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I think Gambit, it's really unfortunate because obviously they did look like they were turning fortunes around a little bit last season and Diamond was back on form. But now there's all this like Volibear shit happening. And they obviously have had some really big problems with their training facilities and their practice house. And what the fuck is happening over there? I don't really know. But I'm not encouraged by what I'm seeing. Are you?
No, because the big problem when you look at Gambit is that, okay, I'll do the same thing I did with Elements, breaking them down player by player. Think about this. So the two new players, as in the most literally new players to LCS, is Cabashard and Betsy. Now, Cabashard was one of the better players last split, and what at times had like a carry mentality. But even in some of their wins, it's not like he was. No one was. Well, at least I was never like, oh, he's the best top laner in Europe. That was it. That was his peak as well. Now he hasn't been that great in their problems now. Betsy, I don't even know. That's why I made fun of when Quickshot said he was a fantastic player, because he's an example for me where the reason why people were so hyped, as far as I can tell, is because you had no expectations for him coming in. He was replacing Neek, who was a fairly kind of middle of the road mid player, and he had sort of 2 or 3 good games, but 2 or 3 literally. Like it's not like we've got a whole highlight of if he can just get back to that form again. No, he had a few good games. So there's 40% of the team accounted for there. Diamond Prox, as you've just mentioned now, I don't know what is going on with Diamond Prox now, because here's the thing. He's got that thing going for him now that Genja had towards the end, where he's still innovating. But the problem is, when they were innovating at their best, they were innovating stuff that was better than the meta. At the moment, they're innovating stuff that's worse, much worse than the meta, and apparently they also don't play the meta champions. That's the recipe for a terrible, terrible team right there. And then you've got the bot lane, which is Edward and Forgiven, and the big problem here is, Forgiven hasn't been playing very well. He's been playing okay, but when you look at the rest of the team as I've described them now, they won't even have a chance to play well because they literally will spend their whole life playing 2v3 and 2v4. Because why wouldn't you? If I was playing Gambit, I would ban out any champion Forgiven gets. Say he gets a win on one next week, I'll ban that, and then I'm just going to dive the bot lane over and over and over and over. It's the formula to win.
I think that's not exactly fair to what we're seeing from Gambit, because Cabashard has shown himself last season to be a bit of a carry threat. But I think the biggest problem with Gambit right now is that Gambit doesn't know what the fuck Gambit is doing. They're picking Volibear and Gragas top and fucking Lulu support and mid fizz. What is going on with their team comps?
I also don't understand the concept. It's the same shit again. This is like when they got Incarnation and put him on Kog'Maw, all those games. It's like you bought Incarnation, okay? Like, you don't buy a fire hose when really you wanted a water pick. You trying to use a fire hose as a water pick is either going to go terribly wrong or be totally ineffective. So if you got Forgiven and you put him with this really aggressive bottom lane support, playmaker, well, why the fuck is he playing Lulu then, mate? Get him onto Thresh. Get him onto Annie. Get him onto shit like that.
There have been a lot of Thresh bans, to be fair, against Gambit.
Okay, great. There we go, Monty. There's one ban. So that opens up the great Cabashard and Betsy to do some work, and they can show us what great players they are, right? There's one extra champion they can pick. No? Apparently not. Instead, they can go for the Gragas top, because luckily that hasn't been banned out. They can flex Gragas, Monty. No, my bad, they can't, because you'd have to be able to play at jungle to flex it.
I would love to see this Gambit roster do well, because I think it could be very exciting. And I'm just hoping that it's that lack of practice that's coming in here and not just a total train wreck auto relegation for the rest of the season.
The team, what's funny is even in Gambit's case, I still feel like some things can turn around. I think the pieces aren't necessarily there to be a good team, but okay, I'm still not sold that Forgiven's like done for and he's trash and everyone's figured him out. I think there's still some. We can see in about the next 2-3 weeks how good that's going to work out. But in terms of SK Gaming, I have no hope for this team whatsoever. I don't know what possible reason you could have to ever think they're going to place in the top half of the table.
Yeah. I too am skeptical.
And remember, the big problem with SK is they've only changed one player. So remember the player who was supposedly so toxic and no one could work with him and all the rest of it? Great, you got rid of him. You know what's great? You even got a known quantity you've played with before. You got someone who is not a terrible player. He's a veteran who's survived through many seasons. If the rest of the team's really good and the rest of the team works and it wasn't that one guy's fault, then you should be on easy street right now. Okay, you won't be as good. You lost your star player. But in the world where we follow all that criteria, you should be like the 4th or 5th best team. And instead they're terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah, they are really not playing well. That is true.
I mean, even that first game just set the standard for it. Because, okay, as you've mentioned, actually, Freddy122 was one of the guys who quietly had a bad split last season, where obviously he'd been so hyped before that. But, okay, you thought, okay, well, whatever. The other team has carries from the rest of the map. It's okay, it's fine. But the guy actually from the game 1 of this split onwards who depressed me was the fact that Sven Skeren so far hasn't been able to be like the spirit of EU and just hard carry the whole team. That hasn't really been happening. I hoped at least that could happen, you know. That's what I usually do, Monty, is when you have a team that was formerly good who become bad, I at least hope, okay, at least give me entertainment value. At least have the star players just go nuts and play to their style and try and carry the game, even if in vain, you know. That can have fun in its own right. And that's not really happening at the moment.
No, it really isn't.
Is there like one key matchup in the league, aside from Fnatic Origin, that you're really waiting on to kind of swing your opinion on a specific team? Like, for example, let's see who Giants play this week. Okay, so Giants play Roccat in the first game and Fnatic in the second. If Giants play Fnatic, will this kind of tell you who Giants is?
I think that Roccat as well. The Giants Roccat match is actually very important because Roccat, again, if we just take a look at the schedules, Giants has had a pretty soft schedule. Roccat has had a very difficult schedule in comparison, and I think this is going to tell us a lot about both of those teams, in particular. I don't really know what's going to happen there. Obviously, I think Roccat has to step up, and Giants has been doing much better than expected. But again, the strength of schedule here is really something to consider.
You've cut out. At least I can't hear your mic. Sounds like you're... I mean, I can still see you, but I can't hear anything. I think your mic jack might have come out or something because it was crackling a little bit. Try just unplugging it and plugging it back in. I can hear you again now. Right, I can hear you now. Nope, now you're going to shit again.
Shit.
Wait there a sec. I still can't hear you. Okay, you're back again. Speak.
I'm back.
Yeah, it's working now. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. This is the jack. So, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, Fnatic Giants should be interesting in terms of what that tells us. That should be... I guess in EU, the matches I'm most looking forward to this week are like both Unicorns of Love games versus Origin and H2K.
So basically, for Unicorns of Love and Giants, this is the decider week. Basically, we'll have a very good sense of them after this week.
That's how I feel.
And here's the thing, Monty.
And maybe Roccat as well.
If they somehow actually do it, Monty, if they somehow like 2-0 both of them, then we will have to. Obviously, they won't actually be the best teams, but we'll have to, in some sense, crown them as like legit teams, Monty. We'll have to have a coronation. We'll have to be like, like the choir in the church, the ceremony as they are brought up, and they kneel before Monty. He knights them with the sword of rotations, and he grants them like legitimacy as real teams in the realm who use strategy, some kind of strategy, and win. Or another way you could spin it, Monte, is it'll sort of be like Monte's been crawling through this alien world and he's battled his way and he's finally broken free of the pack of European teams who were holding him down with all these shit show games, and he breaks away and he gets into like an abandoned area and he looks over there, and as he hears the news on the loudspeakers that like Unicorns of Love have gone 2-0 and Giants have gone 2-0, he looks over and he sees the top part of the of that sort of what would you call it, tiara of the Statue of Liberty poking out from oh my god, it was Earth all along, Monty. They actually are good teams. It turned out they were the best teams all along. It's like the end of Planet of the Apes, Monty. See what I was doing there? You'll have to, it'll be one of them. Either you have to knight them, or you have to, in horror, realise they actually were the good teams all along, Monty. You just naively thought that Elements and Rockheart and those teams could do it somehow. Turns out all along, Unicorns of Love were a good team.
Wow. Well, that'll be an interesting day if that occurs.
What if you took Unicorns of Love and put Faker and Bengi onto them, and then they became the best team in the world? That would be like a similar scenario that's already happened once, Monty. So it could happen a second time. We never know.
I suppose it could.
Okay, when you look at these teams, so Giants, Unicorns of Love, these two teams here, which of the players on these teams actually stand out as like best players in their role? There must be, some of them must at least be contenders by now. They can't all be just total shit, right?
I think Hylissang is great. I really like watching Hylissang.
You bought in on him?
I just think that he's a very interesting engaged support. I think he's very accurate. I think it's good that he draws bans on champions like Morgana and that he sets up a lot of the plays. I think Power of Evil has a really cool way of innovating picks. But, I mean, he hasn't had necessarily the best stats this season overall.
Yeah, but the thing is, Monty, like, he literally, like, you know Genja the Time Lord? He's like a miniature Time Lord, and his power is so, it disrupts the natural force of Earth so much that even Faker's attention is drawn. You know, like when they put the ring on in Lord of the Rings, and Sauron instantly is aware of where they are. Like, Faker hears that like Power of Evil's done a pick, and he's like, what is this pick? Power of Evil does it, I must use it myself to destroy the infidels. Like, okay.
But it hasn't gone the other way yet. We haven't seen the Aurelia mid from Power of Evil.
No, because actually, apparently, Power of Evil, despite his name, is capable of withstanding Faker's might. Like, he's like, listen, what Faker, I believe your name is. Like, I set the meta, mate. You follow what I do, okay? You know, Faker. You know when you were wandering along the beach, and you thought like you couldn't think of any new champions, and suddenly a few came to mind, and then you looked down and you saw some footsteps that were ahead of you. I was there with you the whole time, Faker. That's,
so basically, only Nuke Duck is
walking.
Walking
with Power of Evil, a Faker story. Yeah. No, that's the love triangle, Monty. It goes. Faker loves Power of Evil, but Nuke Duck loves Faker, but Power of Evil doesn't love Faker. And does Power of Evil love Nuke Duck? That's the question. I'll try and find out for you, Monty. I'll reach out there. I'll see what I can do. Maybe he does. That's because good. If you remember, I've just remembered, if you think about it, there was one point in time when Power of Evil was actually replacing Nuke Duck when Nuke Duck got banned. In fact, Nuke Duck getting banned was part of how Power of Evil came to be. So in many ways, Monty, Power of Evil made Faker. Yeah, I just said that. I'm just going to leave that out there. Power of Evil made Faker, Monty. So, and then Faker made Nuke Duck in many ways. And then Nuke Duck actually turned out originally, like he's the original Time Lord, he actually made Power of Evil.
Great. I'm glad that Nuke Duck can be Faker's mind slave.
Yeah, exactly. So, is that it for Europe? Is there anything else to talk about in Europe?
Is there, Thorin, is there? I don't know. I think that Europe is... I just want to see more from Europe. I don't know. Europe is confusing to me right now.
One thing I will say about Europe, actually, one storyline, because the problem is, since Fnatic had just wrecked everyone, and they obviously, by the end of the split, combined with MSI, were the best European team, it's too easy to go like, oh, ho-hum, I guess they're just the best team, and then, we don't need to talk about them much. I mean, I should probably mention, okay, remember when Bjergsen had that awesome NA LCS split and then he'd won IEM? And I set it up like, okay, what next would have to happen in his career to continue on as a great player and become like a top 20 player of all time, top 30 player? You know, that sort of set story. So actually, that is what faces Febiven right now. After having such an awesome MSI tournament where he went up against the best player ever and accounted for himself extremely well for a Westerner, after winning an LCS split, after finishing top 4 in an international tournament. These are all great accomplishments, but now is where back home domestically you have to kind of take care of home court, as if it were. Like, Febiven has to probably have at least a top 4 finish, probably again potentially win LCS, and this is actually probably his chance to maybe even become the best European player. It's wide open in theory for him. So now is where if he falters now, then a lot of that stuff will be like, hey, he might be like a Nukdok. It might be like, okay, you had the good split, and you had a period when things were going your way, and you had a good team around you. But you have to kind of follow up on that. That's the thing about great players. They don't just have the great performance; they have the consistency to back it up. So I think that's a storyline for me that I want to see. Is Febiven going to kind of parlay this into dominating Europe now?
And I mean, he seems to be doing well so far. Definitely, I think on the right track in that regard.
Right, let's switch over to NA. Now in NA, see, it's the way that I actually just like, when I'm talking about like unicorns of love and giants, it's with like a tinge of sorrow in my voice, like a feeling that things didn't have to be this way, that, you know, good men could have prevailed, that the forces of darkness people could have rallied and finally closed them out before they took over the world. But it's with a kind of mirth that I point to you, Monte, and tell you that in NA, 5 teams are tied for top of the league, including Dignitas and Gravity. Hello, welcome to NA. How do you feel about your home region?
Well, there was a reason why I left, Thorin.
What if this is the season that Dignitas goes to Worlds?
You can't even say that with a straight face. You can't even say that with a straight face. I mean, and then we're not even talking about the other side of this coin, which is that Cloud9 is getting destroyed. With the exception of the one game they managed to win against TSM.
Oh no, here's the thing. With some of those other teams I described before, Monty, because only 4 games have been played, like in Europe, there was a lot of teams tied for like 3rd and a lot of teams tied for 6th. So even if you're down on the table, you might actually be like 1 game or 2 games from jumping up 3 or 4 spots, you know. No, let's just be clear here. Cloud9 has sole possession of the 8th spot out of 10 in the NALCS. And in NALCS, there aren't even 5 good teams. So that's a little bit of a problem right there. They're below Enemy and Dignitas.
You were making fun of me last week after I said that I wasn't worried about TSM, but I was worried about Cloud9, considering their systematic breakdown in the TSM game where they barely scraped out that win, but TSM had to make a series of the same mistake multiple times in a row in order to lose that game. Yep. And TSM bounced back really well, won all their games since then. Meanwhile, Cloud9 has been suffering defeats via Gravity and Dignitas. And again, it's hard to say things about teams until we see the full first round robin, because Dignitas has had a soft schedule. Dignitas lost to CLG convincingly. Dignitas beat Cloud9, who I don't think is a very good team right now. Dignitas beat, what was that? What? Oh, TDK with subs, and then Team 8.
Okay. The 2 worst teams who have 0 wins between them.
These teams are not good teams. Cloud9, I think, is a long way from being a good team, but that said, yes, they made a roster change, but Cloud9 has a history of starting the season weak and then somehow fucking ending up in the finals.
Okay, both sides of that then. In terms of Dignitas, I think if you actually lay it out like that, the only win there that has any legitimacy is the win over Cloud9, obviously. And even then, Cloud9 is by far the worst they've ever been. And if they ever do get it together, it won't be like you can retroactively go, oh, and I guess they were good when Dignitas bit. No, that was terrible.
No, it was fucking bad.
So actually, Dignitas, it would almost be impossible to have a 3-1 record and have it be less legit than this one is right here. So actually, I agree with you. Unfortunately, I can't even be like, oh, and what a revelation. This guy's been Yeah, there's not really a whole lot going on there on Dignitas.
I do think that Core and Gamsu are okay. I do think that they're okay.
I think they're always okay.
I think that what's going to happen when Helios gets to play on the team, I don't know. That could put them... They are making changes within the team to try and remedy this. They're obviously not entirely happy with where they are given their wins. I think that Dignitas should be fucking ecstatic that they're 3-1 right now and that they still have time to make changes and maybe make a few mistakes before evening out. So at the end of the season, I suppose... Look, I don't think Helios is a world beater as a jungler, but I do think that maybe having 3 Koreans on the team who can at least speak the same language might be useful.
Here's the thing about Helios. I'll give him his due. Everyone knows I don't particularly like some of the things he's done in the past, etc. But I've never said the guy's shit. Like, for a top-level Korean, I can joke and say he's shit, because he is shit compared to a Dandy and these sorts of guys, where maybe he imagines, because he once was around that stature, that he could be again. No, you couldn't be. But in NA, when I think of the seasons he played in EG and Winter Fox, he was actually a decent player for them, and he at least
right.
you kind of knew what he would do, and it made sense within the context of the team. Like he had some minor strengths, and he played to them. So I actually think that's a good move for Dignitas. That's an upgrade there. Now my big question would be, is he going to bring in that kind of stupid strategy that apparently helped ruin Winter Fox, where he just decided he was only going to gank side lanes? Oh, Monte, update for you. So, as if the hilarious players revealing all hadn't come to a close, there's a message in a bottle got to Thorin's shores that you would not have expected at all, Monte, because it's a man that none of us care about, none of us even remembered existed. A man called Avalon. So this is genius here, Monte. I thought I'd never see the end of this, okay? You remember the hilarity and the kind of bitterness with which I talked about Helios backstabbing all those teammates of his, and then Pobelter talking about how Helios had fucked him over and was only ganking top and bottom, and Link and Doublelift and all that. This is even more hilarious. So remember the joke about Winter Fox is that Helios is now just solely ganking for his brother, and he's not even helping Pobelter. So now Helios' brother, Avalon, has revealed that one of his problems, he feels, is that Helios never used to come top lane and only went bot lane. This just gets better and better, doesn't it? Which lanes was this guy going to? Was he just going to one lane? Was he AFK half the time? What was going on here?
He was just
and dude, listen, I've given you too much credit, Helios. I assumed, okay, maybe you've been a douche before. You didn't realise like the quality that you had in some of your teams, but at least you're enough of a scumbag to be nepotistic and help your own brother out. Apparently you're just uniformly a douche, and apparently you even do mistreat top laners that are your own flesh and blood, and that are like, please brother, I need to succeed in foreign shores, I haven't made it in Korea yet. And you're like, I'm really sorry, but I've got to go bot lane and help the one guy who doesn't speak Korean in our team. I need him to succeed in his career. Altec, I'm all in on you, buddy. Can I come with you to the next team? No? Okay, I'll have to go and join Dignitas then, I guess. Holy moly. Do you think he will improve Dignitas?
Maybe some. I'm holding out. Like, I think that it may actually make things slightly better. Maybe they could end their season somewhere in the middle of the table like this. But
let's see, though, which lanes he ganks.
Yes, the big lane ganking mystery.
Let's play the new segment game show called Which Lane He Gank. And we have to guess, and then you see if you were correct in the game. And if he ganks no lanes, then it's a push, and the house actually wins in that particular scenario. You don't get your money back, so sorry about that, guys, as Winter Fox found out. So another team. Okay, let's do the Cloud9 shit, actually, since you've already referenced them. So what is your sense for Cloud9?
No, everyone wants to hear what you think about Cloud9, because you just fucking talk to all the players. Why are you asking me? I think they're just playing really badly. Like, they don't have a direction. Like, they don't know what the hell to do. They don't even have an identity anymore. It looks like this is a team that has no idea what its own strengths and weaknesses are.
All right, here's my read on Cloud9 after spending a lot of time with them, talking to them, watching some of their games live. First and foremost, the biggest problem in Cloud9 is not Incarnation. The number one problem in Cloud9 is that, I've mentioned this on some past episodes, in the last sort of 2 splits of Cloud9's play, they already weren't the dominant team anymore. They always started off fairly weak, and then they got their shit together as the season went on, and then they gradually got better and better, and then in the playoffs, they were very clutch, and they went far. But even then, they weren't winning LCS, and also they had obvious weaknesses. But one thing they always had was that incredible shot calling, and that manifested in this unreal ability for a Western team to play from behind. In fact, there were these crazy stats where sometimes if they were behind in gold, they won more of those games than if they were ahead, and these like ones that are so counterintuitive, yet this showed a pattern where they had this phenomenal shot calling. And if you think of the style of the shot calling, from talking to the players in the team, it really wasn't calculated and it wasn't communication based. As in, okay, yes, the lanes and Meteos would feed objective stuff and feed information to High, but apparently, from talking to the other members of Cloud9, High really was just some fly by the seat of his pants, brilliant impulsive shot caller. And I emphasize impulsive there, as in the way that it worked in the team was literally, they would be in trouble, he would just say, right, we can do this, let's do it now. And they would all of them in separate. I didn't speak to them all at the same time. I spoke to them all separately and in isolation. All of them said what happened was, if he made one of those shot calls, you just did it no matter what. You didn't think, will this work? Question him or say, no, maybe we can do this instead. You just did it, and you all did it. And we saw that process there led to some incredible games. Now the obvious problem, I hope people are seeing that I'm getting to now, is they don't have that anymore. And it turns out it really was, as I hope we've seen in the first 4 games, that was largely centered around High, it seems. That mainly was his talent. And the rest of them, what was their talent? To follow blindly the call. Well, now they have to follow the calls of someone else. And from what I'm seeing, the problem at the moment is the shot calling. So the big problem, first and foremost, is Meteos is not even close to High as a shot caller. Now, maybe he can develop more. That's fine. The biggest problem, as from talking to the players, I get the sense for, and I think they've even said as much, is that Meteos himself, despite how he might come across as a personality, isn't the super confident shot caller in the way that High was. Like, High was going to just say his shot call, even if it ended up being the one that cost you the game. It sounds like Meteos tries to consider more, and then he's unsure sometimes, and sometimes he doesn't have the authority to be like, we have to do this now. And then, as a result, when you've had that kind of scenario there, I don't know that everyone buys into the shot call as much. And so I think you have to start with shot calling. It sounds like shot calling is a huge problem for them. If you look at the way they're playing, their mid game is terrible. It doesn't matter. It was okay before. Here's the thing. In the first few games, they got behind every time. Like, people dove Incarnation over and over. Balls got behind in one of the first few games. You could always complain that, oh, well, we were behind. Well, they had a game. I think it was the Gravity game. No, was it the... Let me think. Who was it they played? Maybe it was Gravity, where they actually got ahead for a little while, and they had that ridiculous shot call to go to the Dragon for no reason and lost the whole team fight. Do you remember the game I'm talking about?
Not specifically, no.
Let me have a look who they played. Yeah, I think...
It was the Gravity game?
Yeah, it must have been Gravity. No, it might have been Tip, actually. I think it might have been Tip. Okay, I don't fucking know. Anyway, so that was one game where they blew it up and it didn't work. Then you go beyond that, and you have to talk about Incarnation. That's the second problem they have. Because, okay, we're going to give up this shot calling, but we're hoping we're going to get this beast player who's going to carry the lane, and then, hey, it doesn't matter that balls are slumping. We've got a boost mid laner.
He's doing
we've got
very
boost ADC.
poorly in lane.
The thing is, he's doing okay CS-wise in some of the games, especially now they've got him off Cogmore. His problem is, first of all, other teams do everything they can to gank him mid lane, so they get him behind. And then secondly, when he isn't being ganked, from talking to him, he doesn't feel comfortable going forwards and making plays at all. Like, he felt like there wasn't enough vision ever. And so because he's worried and he's playing scared and he's just in this new team, he doesn't want to, like, go 1v1 with someone, then have a jungler come out the bush, 2v1 him, wreck him immediately, and then he's behind in lane again. So as a result, he can't make plays because he doesn't... Listen, he's not like Darian. He's not just going to go make plays with no jungler, no vision. So it seems like at the moment they're not getting any of the strengths out of Incarnation. So there's two big problems here. You need Meteos to get comfortable at shot calling, and now you need Incarnation to get comfortable being Incarnation. And at the moment, neither of those have been addressed as problems.
And
then
remember,
you add in Balls
as
as
a gamble to bring in Incarnation, the player who had never played professionally before. You can't just rely on some sort of crazy solo queue record and assume that that's going to translate into the professional scene.
Do you want a bold approach, Monte? That listen, I'm not someone who could fix this whole team, but if you made me the coach just for next week, and my only job is win the 2 games this week, here's what I would do. I would say to them, Balls, sorry mate, your name's Dyrus now. It's like, No, my name's Balls. And it'd be like that Reek thing. I'd be like, it's Dyrus now, mate. So you still want to play Rumble? Then your name is Dyrus. You don't get any ganks anymore. Your job is to play stuff like Rumble if you can, or Maokai, and you're just going to go even. Or die. I'll allow you to die 3 times in 20 minutes. So don't use them wisely. Sort of like cats with 9 lives, you know. Don't use them all up early or you're going to be dead. Because the reason why you're going to be playing even like that is you're never getting any more ganks. Because Meteos' job now is to be a ward bot. That's right, Meteos is the new Bengi. Your job is to be a ward bot for Incarnation, because here's what we're going to do. You're going to give him all the vision he's just complained about, and you're going to make sure he doesn't get ganked, as in you're going to counter gank, and you're going to try and gank for him. And the reason why you're going to do this, because remember, I've only got 1 week to do all this, and I have to try and win the games, is because if I give Incarnation everything he just asked for, and I give him every reason to be comfortable, and I put him on carry champions, admittedly a week's not really a whole lot of time, but okay, let's at least test the premise. Is he uncomfortable at the moment? Is he not getting what he needs? We'll know after those 2 games if it's complete bullshit and he just isn't cut out for it. He's not going to make it. What do you think?
I think it's a great plan to at least test what exactly Incarnation's upside is.
Because basically, I'm trying to like error check here.
You have nothing to lose. And can we go back to something real quick?
Yeah.
I have a theory. My own theory about Cloud9, and I'm interested to see what you think after having spent time with this team.
Okay.
I think Cloud9 was just an amazing stroke of luck. A team with great synergy that came together to be dominant. And during that time period where they were, up until this season, and maybe still this season, we don't know yet, one of the top 2 teams in NA. What exactly happened with C9? Because one thing that I see C9, they came in with Charlie. Charlie was one of the first people in North America to really, Cloud9 was there to put Charlie in before a lot of other on-site coaches or analysts got involved in the teams. But ever since Charlie came on board, we see teams adding more coaches, more analysts, more infrastructure. And I know that C9 has a manager now with the team, but I'm not sure he actually has like coach powers over it.
I believe he's the general manager.
Okay.
Of the League of Legends and maybe like another team like Hearthstone. So I can't remember what other teams they have.
But he's not what we would consider like a head coach of the team, correct?
No.
So Cloud9, during their streak of success, while every other team was in this battle to increase infrastructure, TSM's, they're adding Loco Doco during the summer split last season, and now TSM has several analysts that were on site for the playoffs and everything like that. We see CLG kind of bringing in a coach now with ostensibly this college like coursework for coaching under his belt, and then they're trying to create a more strict infrastructure in terms of a top-down system where this coach has a lot of authority, and they put more authority in Ziggs. We see Team 8 adding history teacher. We see Team Impulse having a Korean coach from Jin Air. Like Team Liquid has in-house analyst, in-house coach, everything like that. What has Cloud9 done since their very early days to really put more oversight and authority above this team that has some level of either game knowledge or coaching experience? Because to me, they haven't done much. And I may not know about, they may have remote analysts I don't know about, but I think that they took this really unique synergy, and I understand why they didn't want to disturb it. But I think to a certain degree, they are paying a price now for not developing that infrastructure more. Because now that they have to make a player change and the synergy is disrupted, I'm not even sure Cloud9 has the tools to fix the problems that you're stating.
I've stated this theory before, Monte. So I actually have a theory that the perfect synergy, perfect communication actually doesn't require work. In a traditional sense of like laying down, like, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, do you agree, what do you think we should do afterwards? Perfect synergy, perfect communication is very, very simple, and it's very intuitive. And you see when great players just play off each other, it transcends even communication. You know they can't be saying verbally everything they're about to do, and the other guy somehow, in a way, almost does telepathically seem to just know what he's going to do or have a sense for what to do, and then he makes the correct play and he doesn't have to second guess. That's when it works the best. This is what Cloud9 had. This is what the old Gambit had. The problem is that for every other team, you don't tend to have that perfect synergy. So what we've done is we've developed coaching and we've developed systems of streamlined communication. We develop tactics as a way to artificially get as close to perfect synergy and communication chemistry as we can without having it. The problem is Cloud9 lost the perfect chemistry, which is always the risk, and now they don't have any of that framework, all the tools to build up or know how to do it because they've never had to.
Like, so you're corroborating this from your time at Cloud9. I'm asking you a question about my Cloud9 theory about part of their troubles this season. And you are saying from your time with Cloud9 in Los Angeles,
your mic's going to shit again. Okay, it's back.
That you are corroborating what I'm saying.
I think that's part of the problem, because when I look at it, now Meteos, if he's going to be a good shot caller, he's not one right now. So he has to develop into it. Well, again, Hai didn't develop into a good shot caller. Somehow, when they put that lineup together in the Challenger series, they played in the Challenger relegation match against Complexity and dumpstered them the same way they dumpstered everyone that season. They didn't need to build up this shot caller and create him and figure all these things out. He was just fantastic immediately. In fact, I think Lemonation even told me that they were very, very good as soon as they had the 5 set in order. It actually was almost like just flip the switch and they were just really good. And so here's another fix for you, Monte. I asked Lemonation because I know that he took care of the pick and ban, especially in the early days. He essentially, everyone fed him the information and he was kind of like an analyst coach type role, okay? I asked him, okay, so if you're a really smart guy, you have a very good mind for the game, why don't you be the shot caller? And he even said, like, it wouldn't work, or they tried it and it was terrible. So here's the problem. If you want to look at ways to fix some of these problems, I'd tell you this immediately. How about take it, Lemonation out, he becomes the coach. He's going to work on the pick ban, he's going to work on strategy, he's going to work on knowing the players and the personnel he's got. Now we're going to have to put it in a support player. The support player needs to have one of these two qualities. Either he needs to be a very good playmaker and we're going to turn Sneaky loose and we're going to have him be able to be very aggressive and he's going to be able to carry games. Or the support player has to be a shot caller. I think that's another fix you can do there. And that also solves your coaching problem. Now that's not going to happen, by the way, because it sounds to me like Lemonation still wants to play, still thinks they can figure things out. He has synergized very well with Sneaky in the past. That's one of those moves where I can say that because I don't have to break up all these issues there and solve those problems. But as an outsider, that's another potential fix. What do you think?
I think that might be a good fix. I mean, from my interactions with Cloud9, I think Lemonation is solid. I think that the fact that he is older is helpful. He's 25 right now, I believe. And so I think that sets him up with a certain sense of age and authority to actually hold that position. And it's not like Lemonation. Lemonation certainly does his job, and he always has, but it's not like he is a linchpin that the team cannot afford to
They're
change.
never going to have a kill lane bot as long as Lemonation's in the lane now.
Well, they may never with Sneaky anyway. That's not really his style.
I'm not going to spoil all the interviews I did, but I'll give you another little nugget just to kind of tease you, okay? So one of the things that impressed me the most about Lemonation is that when I talked to any of the other players, some of them shared some of those crazy high opinions that I've mentioned on the show before, where they thought they were all very good positions at every position and all that sort of thing. But one of the only players I've ever met who's a Western League of Legends pro who actually had almost like an outsider's view on himself and his team is Lemonation. Like, he even said in the last 2 years when Cloud9 was playing these tournaments, okay, no Western team could have won a Worlds. And if any Western team had somehow won a Worlds type tournament, it would have been a 5 to 10% outlier, fluke one-off chance. And so when he looks at their times, okay, yes, he can look at series they had and go, okay, maybe we could have won this game, or maybe if we had a different round of 8 opponent, we'd have gotten further. But he looks at them, and in general, the placements make sense, and it never would have been possible with Cloud9 or any Western team to have won any of these Worlds. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's just a reasonable opinion. You won't find that in these teams, dude. I mean, we've already made the jokes about Amazing thinks that TSM should have been in the final, and that I guess to him they would have just wrecked OMG in a series, EGG, all these teams. It's very rare you find a player like that. And then you think of his background. This is someone who's done university, who's had a life before League of Legends, who's actually an adult now, who knows he's not the best player, who's had to learn how to play within his own world. He actually has a lot of the qualities you'd want in a realistic coach who's going to find the strengths of the team, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And to just, this is going to be a side rant that I have right now, because I'm really like sick of hearing this to a certain degree from a lot of these Western teams, where they come out there and they say, our goal is to win worlds. We hear that from these Western teams time and time again. But when you look at what it takes to win worlds, just in terms of the quality of practice, the quality of solo queue, it's the ping to servers, it's incredibly unlikely that a Western team is going to be able to come from a Western region and actually come into a world championship as a favorite. Maybe we will get that 5% outlier. I don't know. I can't see the future, but it's not like, because just starting at the ground level, we talk about Korean infrastructure, but that extends into the solo queue environment, where you have way more ranked players in Korea than you have on the NA server. You have way more ranked players in Korea than you have on the EU server. So there's a larger body of players to start with. They all are playing out of Seoul or very close by with 8 ping. There's a culture of esports here. They play in a more competitive environment individually. They play in a more competitive environment as a team. They play with more experienced coaches. And in my mind, any Western team that says our goal is to win worlds should come for a year to China or Korea and compete in those environments. Because if you can't make top 3 in Champions or the LPL, I'm sorry, you cannot win worlds unless there is some insane fluke that occurs. Because even if you're a Western team that beats one of these teams, we're talking about worlds where there are 6 Korean and Chinese teams at a very elite level. And even now we're seeing Taiwan. Now that the Taiwanese talent has been concentrated and they're getting Korean imports over there and they're getting Korean coaches, even the level of AHQ in teams like Flash Wolves right now is pretty decent, actually. And so we only have 6 Western teams at Worlds. There are going to be 8 Asian teams. Maybe you get one more through wildcards, because we have these seeds that have been released. If your goal is to win Worlds, show the fuck up to Korea. Ditch the LCS. There is nothing to say that you can't take a year off of being in the LCS, move your team to Korea, and then compete in Champions. Because Champions also has a history of seeding foreign teams automatically without qualification. And I can tell you this because I keep saying this, I keep bringing this back up. But before last year, Cloud9 and CLG wanted to compete in Champions Winter 2013-2014 because we thought that the start of the LCS would be after the conclusion of the winter season on OGN. And I went to OGN and I said, if Cloud9 and CLG want to come out here and compete, would they have to qualify? And OGN's response was, no, we will give them a seed. Now, it ended up that the LCS was going to start before the tournament ended, so it wasn't actually possible if the teams wanted to stay in the LCS. You may take a hit to your brand if you do this, absolutely. But I don't want to hear any more fucking talk from coaches or team owners or anybody in the West about our goal is to win worlds, because in my mind, if you are not doing this thing, that is not true. Your goal is to stay in the LCS, to reap the rewards of Western sponsors, and to grow your brand. It is not to win a fucking tournament. That's my rant. I've been dwelling on this a lot recently, but I'm just sick of it.
I want someone to get a Photoshop, and it has to be like the Uncle Sam poster, and it's like, I want you to quit the LCS and come over to OGN and compete and try and get a top 3.
Think about it. How can you even reasonably have that goal if you are not training in the most competitive environment? How are you going to get this big leap forward in skill that is necessary to compete with these teams unless day in and day out you train in that same environment under the same parameters? And even if you think about the number of games, okay? In LCS, you compete in LCS right now, you play 18 games a season. You compete in Korea right now, you play 18 best of 3s. You could play theoretically triple the number of games in the booth in that competitive environment. Practice because you're playing best of threes instead of best of ones, adapting over a series, which is a much more valuable skill if you want to play in a best of 5 in a playoff at Worlds. Like, there isn't anything close to this level of training. So come to Korea, prove yourself, come to China, prove yourself, make top 3, go to Worlds that way, and then I will fucking believe you that your goal is to win Worlds.
I think that's also a problem as well, what you just said about the best of 3s. Because one of the problems I've always brought up, I always used to use Link as my example because he'd gone out in the first round so many times, that this is a guy who'd played for over 2 years, and yet you looked at his career and he'd only played, like, in the LCS era, something like 5 or 6 best of X series.
Do you remember we were talking to Edward and we asked him?
He'd never played a best of 5.
No, he had played one.
Yeah.
In like
ever, and he'd been on one of the best teams ever.
And this was what, 8 months ago we had him on the show?
Yep.
Think about how long Edward's been around. 1 best of 5 up until that point. Up until the point he was on the show. So I'm sorry to so far remove ourselves from that conversation, but seriously, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can tell, any statements like that are horseshit because the actions don't follow through. And maybe you could say something like, well, that's just my goal. And I could say, well, my goal is to become president of America, but I'm not doing anything that actually helps me become president of America. So why the fuck am I even saying it?
So here's the thing. Along those lines, the point I was going to make was, even the most successful Western team in LCS alone, let's say they play both splits, can only play a maximum of 6 best of 5s. And that's if they don't skip the first round. If they skip the first round, they might have played only 4 best of 5s, not including like an MSI type tournament as well. So 4 series they've had a chance to prepare for, play out, see how it works. Meanwhile, a team in OGN will have played like 36 best of 3s, and then potentially 4 to 6, or maybe only 2 best of 5s.
Yeah, the thing is, you probably will end up playing less best of 5s.
But the amount of
team, just because of the system that's in place.
But literally every day you play competitively in Korea, you are practicing. How do you draft first game? How do you use cheese? How do you adapt to what the team did in the first game? How do you win in the third game when you both did everything you could in the first and second game, and what you did in the first game that you narrowly won with was totally counted in the second game, and now you have to figure out something else for the third game? All these valuable skills, no one is practicing in Europe. And what's more, when you play in Europe, you're playing against other teams who haven't practiced these skills.
Yep.
So you're actually set up to fail in a sense by the people who've designed the league. And by the way, I'm not going to harp on this, but OGN has a best of 3 format. That's its own format it has there. LPL has the best of 2 format. The only leagues Riot has decided the format of have the weakest format and have the worst format to prepare you to win Worlds.
To be fair to LCS, the league has consistently gotten better in format. This is, we went from best of 3s, except for the finals, all playoffs on one weekend, into the current format. And I think, and even the circuit point system has been implemented now by Riot. So it has been a development that has been overwhelmingly positive. I still do disagree with best of 1s.
But I mean, when people use that whole thing of like, oh, the infrastructure includes stuff like structure of the league and how you compete and how you practice. So some of that is going to be on the league as well. You have to make here's the problem, Monte. This is how bad it's gotten. I almost feel bad because the obvious thing to say here, Monte, would be a way to fix it would be let's standardize leagues across the world. But you know what my immediate fear there is, Monte? See, the logical thing would be, well, no problem, let's standardize it. It'll be the same as LCK. No, I think you can tell what my worry is. Yeah, let's standardize it. These Asians are getting this extra advantage. Let's make them have LCS format. That's what I'm worried would happen.
I don't think they're going to standardize formats. I think that there is a certain flavor to having formats that are different between regions, and the thought of having every region in best of 3 actually horrifies me as an analyst, because the amount of games would be even more overwhelming than it is already. For selfish reasons.
Okay.
Of course.
Anyway, before we digress, though, we were talking about Cloud9. Now, the thing with Cloud9 is this. I think that in time, the shot calling will improve. But let's not go crazy. I don't think it will ever be at the level that High had, because it sounds like it wasn't even something that was... It sounds like it was a one-off, brilliant shot calling style. That also, by the way, bearing in mind we never got to see it elsewhere, we don't even know that it was totally brilliant in isolation. For all we know, if you put High onto CLG, maybe that brilliant shot calling doesn't work, maybe people don't buy into it, maybe you even needed the two things combined, exactly those players with exactly that shot call. It was the perfect match in that sense. Take that away, like basically, maybe High isn't like the fucking Peyton Manning who you put any pieces around him and it always works and he will always win X amount of games. Probably not. So, with that said, I do think Meteos should improve, assuming he continues and learns how to do the role, but I don't think it's ever going to be at that level again. So we have to fix other qualities if Cloud9 is ever going to be a top team again.
Well, now, Incarnation is just this massive question mark.
I do think Incarnation, as it goes on, will have some good games, but again, is he going to be the... I don't think he's going to be the Bjergsen type dominant player that people had hoped for. I think he could be like a Keen, a Pobelter. I don't see any reason he couldn't be around the level of these players. A solid to upper, above average NALCS mid. But I don't think he's going to be like this force that just single-handedly can lift his team and carry them, like you saw Bjergsen do in the game against, I think it was maybe Gravity, actually, the one where Bjergsen just went mental on LeBlanc and just hard carried the whole game. I don't think he's going to do that very often, or at least not as often as Bjergsen does. And as a result, it's not going to, essentially, him doing well is not going to fill all the holes that the rest of Cloud9 has, which was kind of the hope, you know. So, yeah, there's some issues still in Cloud9. Now, here's one weird thing that I'm going to say now that people won't understand if they're a Cloud9 fan. One of the best things about High leaving, because I've seen this in other games, is that when you have a team like Gambit, or you have a team like Cloud9 now, or you have a team like in CSGO, we had Ninjas in Pyjamas, had the same 5 players for over 2 years. When you have these lineups like this, that are the legendary lineup, that have a special chemistry, and they wait till the bitter end to change a player, that's great, because the problem is part of the reason they never change a player is because of that logic, like, well, we can't change any players and we have to keep these 5, and since we haven't removed this player, we won't remove this player. The great thing about once you finally remove a player and things go badly is it opens the floodgates. Like, if at the end of this split it turns out Balls can't be a top player anymore, well, now there's no reason to keep him. You don't have the special lineup anymore. If you can get a better player top lane, you can now do that. So in a weird way, either they figure it out and it goes well or well enough, or now the door is open to get other players who, by the way, would definitely want to join the wonderful Cloud9 organization, which has great funding and an excellent history and some good players on it still, like Meteos, who wouldn't want to play with someone like this, or Sneaky, excellent players still at their positions. The door is open where if it doesn't work, now as long as they're open to doing it themselves, they can upgrade these positions. And who knows, maybe you can get other European players in.
Yeah, absolutely. Cloud9 still has openings for foreign players that they could take. This is still an option for them.
So I don't think it's not the end for Cloud9. I don't even think it's the end in this split, especially with some of the bad teams here. I think they can still get their shit together and be like the 4th or 5th best team around that sort of level. Speaking of which, though, the other teams at the moment who are doing well, what do you actually think of Gravity?
I think Move had a good week last week. I'm not sold on this team at all. I think that it's important to remember that week 2 Gravity did look improved, but then again, I'm like the last person to jump on the Liquid bandwagon, and they beat Cloud9 in its rather sorry state right now. But week 1, they barely pulled off a win against TDK, and then they got rocked by Enemy. So I still have reservations about this team. I don't really see them at the same level of consistency that we're seeing like CLG, I think, hitting right now, or TSM.
See, the game I'm waiting for in terms of Gravity is I want to see when Gravity play Tip. And what I hope happens is that Rush just comes in there and he's like move, bitch, get out the way. And then he just goes ham and he wrecks move completely. That's my hope. That's what I've been thinking of the whole time.
We do have Gravity versus CLG this week, which I think is going to give us some pretty good information.
Is CLG legit?
I think CLG can be much more consistent. Just from my observations of CLG, especially watching the CLG TSM match this last week, is yes, CLG made mistakes. I do think that TSM is the better team. But the weirdest thing about CLG versus TSM this time was that in a lot of ways, they seem to like reverse strengths. First off, TSM, when they played CLG, they had how can I put this? They had like good shot calling and objective control in the early game. And we saw them kind of going up on a lot of these objectives, and CLG just kind of being just a hair behind on some of these. But the big change was, guess what? CLG actually demonstrated some pretty good team fighting, surprisingly. Right?
Well, they learned, because what they did, Monte, is after having, that thing of like, sometimes brothers, like, they carry resentments over like the relationship and the family and the accomplishments. But the way that in old-fashioned, old-timey stories that you resolved it is you had a good old-fashioned punch-up when mom and dad weren't around. And afterwards, you kind of like settle the hierarchy of like who's top dog. And, you even kind of respect them because they fought back and whatnot. Well, actually, in a social sense, after they all went in on each other and betrayed each other and stabbed each other in the back, now they all respect each other for at least fighting back. Double F's like, actually, you know what? You've got a bit of spunk to you guys. So their team fighting in real life got better, and now it's transitioned into the games. It's true, Monte. It's all about the social aspect. I've learned this.
Damn. Well, I guess I can't really argue with that. But jokes aside, if we kind of like rewind time to last season where CLG appeared to have kind of better shot calling, better objective control, but just shit the bed in terms of team fighting, I think that the Bard, like if we look at TSM's composition, they really had a lot of engage as long as Bard hits his ults, but they weren't using Bard properly to engage. And so they kind of had to wait for CLG to have an ill-advised tower dive in order to turn that game around, make a bad shot call. But CLG, even in spite of being behind, was sort of fighting their way back in there via team fighting. And Pobelter seems to be a really big upgrade in that department. So maybe they lost some shot calling, but now their team fighting is looking a little bit better. My big problem with that game in terms of CLG versus TSM was, why are the junglers doing nothing? You know what I mean?
Because Derek Smithy and Santorin.
I mean, nailed it. But
I mean, if you put a sheep in with a kitten, it's probably not a lot going to happen there. The sheep can like meh really loudly in the kitten's face, and the kitten could grab on and be slightly annoying on the wool of the sheep, but no one's going to like decapitate the other one or anything.
What a great
That's my analogy. Okay.
Really nice one. Okay. In the battle of the chicken versus the sheep, there are no decapitations. Thank you, Thorin. Anyway, I mean, you pick Rek'Sai and you pick Lee Sin, but no one is actually attempting to make... There was like a gentleman's agreement between the two, like no rush until 20 or some shit like that. I don't know what to say. That's a problem. That's a problem that's going to be taken advantage of by good teams somewhere.
I actually think the biggest difference in CLG, I think Pobot has been decent, had some above average games. He hasn't set the world on fire. To me, the biggest change in CLG looks so far actually to be Zion Spartan. Yep. His games have been very good, and on top of that, he's a guy where last split he would have these inexplicable moments in the mid game where he would just like engage right into a bunch of people. He'd have no follow up whatsoever, and he'd just get wrecked completely.
Yeah, they didn't know how to engage as a team at all. And
so here's the weird thing, okay, Monty. It's like a team that lost a bad shot caller has improved in some ways, and now other players are playing better. It's interesting how that works, isn't it? I don't know what it could be. It feels like there's a link to the past there that's been kind of lost there. So, no, but actually I think that's been the major upgrade, is that finally CLG has a good top laner, which we've never seen before.
Fair enough.
Least in like modern memory.
Yep, that's very true.
at least since like Nidalee was nerfed in like November of 2011 or whatever the fuck, you know. So yeah, CLG for once looks legit. Now I will add the caveat. It does help that Cloud9's gone to shit. Who the fuck knows what Gravity are about? They look like the best of one team. Yeah, it's not like this super strong team.
Liquid is doing liquid things. Like, they beat TDK with subs in Team 8 in week 1. They lost to Gravity, and they beat Enemy in week 2. We haven't seen them versus TSM. We haven't seen them versus CLG. I'm still not all aboard the hype surrounding Team Liquid. I think that I still question a lot of what goes on Team Liquid because they haven't made any roster changes, but they're still not a top team. Like, I don't know what's going on here. What is the problem with Team Liquid?
Well, in the Gravity game, I'm trying to think what happened in that game. Because as far as I remember, they just got completely wrecked.
Yes, they did. And it's not like, I mean, Gravity was doing Gravity things. Got mid and Move playing fucking Jungle Jarvan for no reason. Why would you even play Jungle Jarvan? You had plenty of other junglers open. I don't know.
What did you think of when Gravity played Cloud9? If I'm remembering correctly, that was the game where Keen got a bunch of early kills, I think onto Incarnation, and immediately like rushed an Abyssal Scepter, and at that point it was like, you're in for a bad game now, Incarnation. I think it was the one where Incarnation played. Was that the one where he was playing Victor or Azir?
Yeah, Victor TF.
Yeah, that was a bad time. What do you think of Keen's funky builds?
I'm not a big Keen fan. I think that his style lacks consistency. I mean, I don't think, just from watching him in that first week of competition, like, I'm just not sold on the fact that mid Malphite, AP Malphite is fucking good right now. I think it's terrible. I think they won over a crippled team that hasn't been able to get its players, but he wasn't doing anything in the late game, really.
Oh yeah, and speaking of the other Cloud9 loss, the one that they lost to Tip. So in this game, Monte, let me just describe the scenario for you. Remember the team that used to have some of the best shot calling, and one of the great things was when something became an advantage for the enemy, they found like, well, what is the counter to this? They very quickly could figure out something they could do. So they lost in this game to split push LeBlanc, and then went for a Desperation Baron, which they were sure not to start until Split Push LeBlanc had finished pushing down the inhibitor and could join them to battle them at the Baron pit. Like, this was not like anything you've ever seen from Cloud9 before. This was an alien game. Like, that was the worst indictment, I think, of the whole experiment so far, was how badly that particular game went, because they had no answers at any point in the game. They had no clue even what to do.
And I think they sort of stumbled into the TSM victory due to TSM's over-aggression rather than the big W there. So I don't know. I think Cloud9 has a lot of issues.
What do you make of Enemy, who have actually lost to... Let me see... Okay,
they beat Gravity. They lost to TSM. They beat TDK. They lost to Liquid. I think that they're probably exactly where they're going to be this season. Not bottom of the heap, but very middling. I think Enemy have enough talent that they don't have to be particularly worried about relegation, especially considering TDK, even if they somehow get these players, even if they start to gel, they're in such a big hole right now that it may be difficult for them to climb out of. I think Impulse at least has enough individual talent that they're going to be maybe like a 50 to 60% team this season. And then Enemy may be around the 5th to 7th range.
Okay, here's the thing, Monte. I realize Tip have an aggressive jungler in Rush. But actually, if you think about how Rush plays in general, he reminds me more of the Liquid style, where it's like a jungler top synergy. Those two tend to work together and have a great work. So here's the thing: I want
Fnatic style.
I want Incarnation to take a page from Xiao Zhao's book, because Xiao Zhao can't communicate with anyone on his team. He doesn't speak English. He is not fluent in English after all that time. Because remember, the first split he was speaking Chinese still and had a translator. The other players on his team, 2 of them are Korean, they're in the jungle, and the bottom 2 are Americans. He just sits in the mid lane speaking Chinese to himself, presumably, and he picks whatever the fuck he wants, literally, picks whatever he wants. He just picks stuff he likes, right, regardless of what the meta is. And some games he does nothing, it's true. Sometimes he has no impact on the game. But some games, he goes utterly fucking bananas, just wrecks everyone, and hopes that everyone follows up on what he does. And if they do, they can win. If Incarnation really isn't getting all this help and isn't getting all the wards and all the rest of it, you just take a page out of that book. Listen, if it fails, I'd rather fail like that than fail playing really safe and then just getting shipped off back home and going, well, I never really got a chance, they never gave me the vision. You know, it actually wouldn't be a bad approach.
I don't disagree. I think that might be actually quite interesting. Given the right circumstances, that could work quite well.
Because even when I saw like that sick game that Xiao Zhao had against Cloud9, it was really, really sick. But it's not like I can look at it and go, wow, what a world-class mid lane. It's the same thing that was in LMQ. He either went totally nuts or just did nothing, even on sometimes on the same champion. It wasn't even like it was always pick dependent. He just looks like Xiao
Zhao's Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, he spent his whole life at the status that Dade is at right now, where it's like, oh, which Dade turned up today? He's like, you know what, guys, not feeling it today. I'm just going to chill back here and mail this one in. It's like, well, we need you, man. He's like, listen, I'll save it for the next one. You know, just trust me, the next game will be better. But sometimes Dade still goes ham, you know, goes absolutely. But then when he does, you're like, okay, could you do that again every game? He's like, listen, like my contract says 1 in every 3 games. Like, you know, I'll turn up to the others. I'm not saying I won't turn up, but he's the guy who... Listen, he's a really brilliant student, but sometimes he's been partying and he turns up and just sleeps through class. You know, he's not always going to pass that pop quiz.
Wow. It's a great analogy.
There's the analogy for you. So, I actually feel like NA is really weird, though, because here's the thing. When I look at these teams, I think that TSM is clearly the best.
Yeah.
CLG and Liquid, it feels like they should be the solid 2 and 3, but then it feels like Gravity... Impulse, and if they got their shit together, Cloud9 should be the like 3 that are really jumbled up after them. I think that's my kind of hierarchy right now. Do you have any that you'd shift up or down?
So that was TSM, CLG, then like Gravity, Impulse, and
Liquid.
Liquid. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty fair. Maybe Enemy might sneak in there by the end. We'll see.
And if Cloud9 got their shit together, I'd put them with that group, but obviously they haven't at the moment.
I think that TDK has just been out of the running for so long right now that I wouldn't be confident in them turning it around.
The thing with TDK is nothing's changed. We haven't seen the players play. Emperor could still be dynamite. Ninja could still be really good. Problem is, you'd already lost 4 games out of the 18 you're going to play, and you're likely to lose 2 more games. So you're going to be 0-6, and they would have to win 12 games, and even then they'd only be 12-6. So it seems very unlikely that's going to happen. So that probably doesn't matter. They're off the table. Teammates looked terrible. Let's forget that. Enemy, okay, they can at least challenge the group we just talked about, the Cloud9, Liquid, Gravity group of people, Tip. But if you had to put your money on them, probably not. So who gives a fuck about the bottom 3, basically? That's also why it's very dangerous for Cloud9, because they've got so much to fix. And at the moment, there's 4 or 5 teams that can all be above them. And they need to... Okay, they've got some circuit points, but they need to do well, in theory, in the split. Otherwise, they're going to have a bad seed and play like CLG... TSM in the first round.
Yeah, that absolutely could happen. And if they end up in that 6th place seed, it seems very unlikely that we're going to see them go to Worlds.
Well, I guess they wouldn't play in the first round. They'd play them in the semi-finals. But okay, you get my point anyway. So, let's just leave the NA there and go over to Korea. I always say China somehow, but we'll go over to Korea. So, in Korea... First things first, Monte, we will hold an accounting. Now...
Oh, God.
You promised me, Monte, that if there's one game I could be sure would be a 2-0, it would be SK Telecom against Anarchy. And that Anarchy are dog shit, and SKT's the real deal and all that stuff. How the fuck did this go to 3 games?
I don't know, dude. Anarchy actually did play okay in those games, but SKT was sort of a bit of a train wreck right there. Unfortunately for them, very surprising.
But it allowed Faker to come in and do Faker things.
Well, he was doing Faker things that whole series, so that was good. He was there all the games.
I made this point in my video about Coma. It's got fucked up where the best case scenario for SK Telecom is that Faker doesn't play, and that for me, the best case scenario is that I hope SKT fails so hard that they have to like summon Faker, and he's like, "Who wakes me from my sleep? and they're like, "Please, Lord Faker, you have to come and win." He's like, "Okay, I will." And then he comes in and wrecks them all. You're like, that's pretty fucked up when that has to happen. Can't he just play all the games in 2-0 people?
He was playing all the games.
In these ones, he was, yeah.
In these games, he was. And I wasn't very impressed with his Ahri in Game 3. And his Orianna, basically, Bang & Wolf just shit the bed in Game 2. That's what actually happened.
So Monte, you know how you can't spell wrecked without KT? You didn't actually mention in that when they get wrecked, KT is also present. It doesn't dictate who is getting wrecked there. It just says that there will be wrecked when KT's involved. So
yeah, KT's performance today, so this is after I was casting earlier this afternoon, was pretty abysmal. Also, their IM games were not that great, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on over there right now. Their drafts have been really poor recently. I don't know.
But
seems like
isn't so the team they lost to was Ku, who let's just frame this here, guys. Thorin, even though he knows it's hard times right now, has never quite lost belief that Ku can be a good team. He always tries to convince Monte, like, maybe this week, Monte, maybe this week they can show some of that old magic.
Hey! I said they played well in their last series versus CJ.
But then Monte's always like, KT, my team, they're back in the league. They're back. They're playing great games. Nagne, this is late 2013. I'm back on the bandwagon. Arrow, excellent player. I'll pretend like that playoff series at the regional didn't happen. And that never happened. All he did was win OGN, then take the summer off. That's my Monte impression. But I'm gonna have to work on that one. It's not very good at the moment. I've always got some of it down, but. Their problem is they were facing Ku and the gang, and they had to get down on it. They had to celebrate good times, come on, and they got wrecked. So yeah, it was over.
They did get wrecked today. They did get wrecked.
What do you actually think of Ku though? Ku, it feels like they're turning the corner a bit.
I think that Ku has played really quite well in their last couple series versus KT and CJ. They lost to CJ, but I think they could have 2-0. They were on the brink of a 2-0. They had a competitive game too. I think that Ku is now prioritizing this Corki again. I'm worried because I want to know what happens because Ku's back to like first picking Corki and playing these poke compositions. And yes, Kuro looked great on Varus today. But I just see these poke comps coming back in, and I see Ku going back to what got them success early on for the first half or so of the spring season. And I wonder if that's going to be enough to keep them rolling, or if they're just regressing back to these strategies of poke and kiting. And we're not going to see them really break out again. I think it's super cool to see Smeb playing Riven, and he's very good at it. I mean, Smeb's number 2 in Korean solo queue right now, and his most played champion is Riven. I'm concerned that they haven't actually adapted. They're just going right back to what was successful in the past.
So, Jinair haven't played yet, but last week they played, admittedly, Spenu and Samsung, and they went 2-1 with Samsung, and they beat Spenu 2-0. Is Jin Air like Monte's third best team in Korea right now?
No. I think before this week I would have rated them at number 4, but behind SKT, CJ, and KT. But my big thing with Jin Air is they're one of those teams. They're another one of those teams that has had a very soft schedule. So far, if we look at the matches that they've actually played this season, we're in a situation where they played who they played? Spenu. In week 1, they played IM. In week 2, they played Anarchy, both these 2-0s. They got absolutely destroyed by KT, and then they 2-0'd Spenu. So I don't have a large degree of confidence in this team until I actually see them play somebody who I think is good.
Monte, Najin have won their last 2 series versus Spenu and IM. That's what we've got to now, where that's like a good thing. Like, they took care of the trash, Monte.
Well done, Najin.
Is there anything
Najin,
looking up for them?
The most infuriating team in League of Legends, because out of any team you could point to, I think, on the planet where you're like, wow, that team should be good on paper, it's probably Najin. So why do they keep sucking?
And not only that, but Goong has... Here's the thing, Monte. Goong has reached ambition status, which is if you give him his champions and sort of like 1 to 2 games out of 3, he can have a really good game, and everyone's like, hey, he's a pretty good player, actually. And then somehow that allows them to forget in the games where he does badly, like, oh, he also does this as well, though. So he's just good enough to not kick him.
You know what's funny about Goong? He has more kills than any other player this season so far.
Okay. What does that mean then? Analyze that for me.
When he goes off, he tends to go off in a really big, flashy way where he will just take over a game and dominate it.
Then let me ask you this then. Maybe Najin's approach is all wrong. Maybe you build it back around the mid lane.
I wouldn't do that because I'm worried that Goong is still very meta dependent. And we've seen his Cassiopeia play, and it's been pretty good now. His Victor play was okay, but I wouldn't put all the eggs in the Goong basket until we see him against some more top tier teams. Because remember, Najin did beat Ku, so that was a pretty nice win for them. But they got absolutely wrecked by SK Telecom, and then from there on out, it's been IM and Spenu.
See, it feels like Goong's problem as well is that he really should be in China right now, and he should be having the 1 out of 2 games where he bodies. The other one he doesn't. He collects his check at the end of the month. A bunch of Chinese players say stuff in Chinese around him, do stuff, and we're like, well, he is playing with people who don't speak Korean. He can't be expected to team play every game. And then he goes home, sleeps in a mansion, and that's it for him. You know, that's the world he should be living. He's like one of those people who got left behind after the rapture, and he just sees a bunch of shoes all around the place, and he's like, but wait, what about me? Or maybe I got it wrong there. Maybe the analogy should have been he's the kid. Well, it's actually quite a politically incorrect analogy at this point in time. But you know the kid in the Pied Piper story, Monte, who got left behind? He had certain disabilities, I believe, which back in those days of telling stories was just like, well, fuck that kid. But you know the one who didn't get to go with the Pied Piper into his magical land where he stole children apparently and gave them a better life? You remember that guy? That's Goong. He should have gone to China, but somehow by the time he hobbled up there on his 1 out of 2 champions, the door was closed and he was trapped with the other rejects in Korea.
Great story.
What about IM? Because IM played a blockbuster against Spenu that went 3 games. Out. Who gives a fuck about those teams, dude?
Get out.
I actually went and watched that game, by the way.
Today?
The one from last week that I hadn't seen because I'd been in LA, where, between the games, it shows the highlights of last week's games. I saw set 2 of IM versus KT.
Dude, I told you on Twitter not to watch that.
No, I had to watch it because Because for once, Monte, Reddit was right. You know where they're like, oh, when it's a game that's really close, Monte would be like, this is a high-level game. But if it's a shit show in the West, he'd be like, this is a disgrace. Well, actually, this is your chance, Monte, to finally show that you do have an objective standard. Because this was like fucking Unicorns of Love versus Copenhagen Wolves of Korea. This game was a fucking abomination. People were losing fights at the like Nexus exposed in the enemy's base. This was an appalling game at every single stage. No one played anything correctly at any point in the game. It was exciting. I can't lie. It was very exciting.
It was the only player who was actually doing things that made sense.
It was fucking appalling, this game.
It was terrible. So fuck people who say,
but if you're a pleb, if you're a pleb who likes kills, go and watch this game. Game 2 of IMKT. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's just mindless action.
Comes back from 3 inhibitors down and both Nexus turrets down all at the same time to win the game.
Which, remember, the whole point of why that's not supposed to be possible is not just like, well, the enemy's got that advantage, all the rest of it. It's that even if you somehow win that fight to kill the enemy, you then have to spend the next 5 minutes clearing all the fucking minions out your base using every ability, spamming it and hoping they don't rush in and kill you, while they can potentially take 3 objectives. That's why it's not supposed to be possible to come back from 3 inhibitors down.
Yeah, precisely.
I don't know. That's an abomination, that game. That the less spoken about that, the better. So here's another game I have to ask you about, Monte. So SK Telecom, who went 3 games with Anarchy, went 3 games with Samsung as well.
Yes.
How is that possible?
Samsung is actually pretty good. I know that's going to sound weird.
Right, are you ready? No, this is why I have to like set it up again. And by pretty good, you mean what? And
5th, 6th. Competitive. They're
okay.
They're going to upset at least one good team this season, I think. I mean, it's one of those strength of schedule things. Samsung started out this season absolutely bodying Spenu, as everybody does. But then, next week, come back, play against the Ku Tigers. Well, they played against KT, lost 0-2. Then they play against the Ku Tigers. They win a game. And they look good while doing it. That's one of my favorite games this season is when Samsung was playing that pick composition with TF and Bard and Sivir. And then we see them come back again. They take a game off Jin Air. Then they take a game off SKT. Like, they're actually getting dangerously close to winning a best of 3 against a pretty good team. So Samsung, I'm actually very interested to see how Najin and Samsung goes. But because they've had to play like top 4, top 5 teams this entire season so far, they should actually normalize in their record once they actually hit Anarchy, once they actually hit IM.
Are you ready for another one of those crazy comments that probably doesn't even work now, but I just like to say, hoping that somehow it travels back through like the ether and hits one of our ears like a year prior. Fury, top 4 AD carry in Korea.
Yeah, he's good. He's very good.
Would he be in your top 4? Think of who we've got, Monty. We've got Bang. We've got
Pilot.
We've got
Pilot's
OQ.
very good. Pilot, OQ. OQ's actually really gotten less risky as well. Prey,
Are those
Arrow,
3 all but Arrow
Space.
Arrow isn't actually in Korea. I mean in the Korean region. Okay, he's for KT. Okay, got Arrow. Okay,
Yeah,
so then, he's not in the top
Fury,
4 then?
Yeah, I'd definitely say Fury's top 4.
Who's he better than out of those 4? Who are you going to nudge out? Because I don't think you want to nudge any of them, so who?
Who would I say? Well, Prey is playing better now, but Prey was definitely not playing as well as Fury at the beginning of the season.
But we've got Bang, Pilot,
Bang is just a
Arrow.
workhorse. He's not like a guy who's going to carry you in games.
Okay, so he can be... So Fury is better than Bang as a pure AD carry.
As a guy who's going to carry the shit out of you, yes. I think Pilot's the best. So I think we've got Pilot, OQ, Fury, and Prey's been doing better, but only on Corki. And Prey did not play well on this season on anything pretty much except for Corki. So I'm a little skeptical about Prey at the moment.
So if you could hypothetically take Fury and put him on a good team, like if you put Fury tomorrow onto CJ,
Oh my God.
Would they be an amazing team?
I'd love to see that shit. I would love to see that.
Is he like the new rising talent, basically? You think he's the next great
him
player?
and Pilot. I think Finn, for The Score, wrote a very interesting article on...
Did you say Fionn?
Yeah.
Sounded like you said Finn, like a fucking Irish name or something. Finn McDougall for the Score Esports wrote a very interesting article. I can't even do that. It turned into like Dornish out of fucking Game of Thrones. Anyway, yeah. Fionn.
He wrote a very interesting article about Pilot and OQ recently, about them kind of being the rising talents in the Korean region, and comparing Pilot to Deft and OQ to Imp. But yeah, I think if we look at just the talent that we have in Korea right now, Fury is capable of carrying games, and he's pretty consistent even when he's losing. So I really like Fury as a player. He's got a really strong laning phase too.
Yeah, I mean, I have to tell you, Monte, I didn't read it. I mean, as far as I know, Fionn hasn't even been like nominated for any kind of a Pulitzer or anything. He's never even apparently attended like the White House press correspondence dinner. So I don't read his esports stuff, mate. Like, it's not interesting to me, you know. He doesn't have the gravitas needed to be a great esports writer, you know. Basically, to have never worked in esports before. You see what I did there? Okay. So when this comes out, people might have... Actually, I don't know what day it is, but... No, maybe it'll come out tomorrow. We'll see. There's 4 games that haven't been played this week. So CJ plays SK Telecom. A rematch of the semi-finals, but not really semi-finals. The penultimate game of last season, which was the great best-of-5 series.
Really good series.
With how it's been going recently, is CJ going to beat SK Telecom in this best-of-3?
I don't think so, but hard to say for certain, obviously. I think that this will go over to SKT, but SKT was slipping up a little bit against Anarchy, as we saw today. They may not have had as much time to prepare. Only kind of 1 day of preparations for CJ. That may have been caused by the fact that the Anarchy match was so close. They weren't actually adequately prepared for Anarchy. CJ continues rolling, though. The thing is, CJ just always plays that 3-game series, right? They've been like sort of derping around during game 1 and misplaying a lot of stuff that you think that they would be able to more efficiently deal with.
See, one of the phrases you just said there, Monte, is how I imagine you explaining what happened in EULCS. Like, they weren't adequately prepared for Anarchy. Like, you know, that's what happened last split, right?
That's what happened. The Unicorns of Love, they came in.
Ku plays Jin Air. Now, there's a series with 3 games written all over it, right?
I don't know. Jin Air, that's why the only time Jin Air has played a team that is even remotely good, which was KT, was they ended up just getting wrecked 2-0 by KT. Just absolutely, totally annihilated. And granted, I don't think their pick and ban phase is going to be as bad as it was in that particular game, but it still worries me that they couldn't get it together. You know what I mean?
So do you think actually that Ku is going to win that?
I do. I do think Ku's going to win that, and I think Ku might win it 2-0.
Okay. If Anarchy takes a game off KT, will it shake that faith of yours, which I hope has already been shattered?
I'm sorry.
Smithereens.
You're asking me about that? If we're talking about my faith in KT, did you hear me casting IM versus KT game 2? Like, I don't even know what to tell you anymore.
Listen, Monte, just because someone runs around on you, cheats on you, breaks your heart, doesn't mean you don't give them another chance.
Oh, is that right?
I'm talking about your own life here, mate. You've done it repeatedly, you know. True.
No.
Katie always find a way back into your heart, Monte, and they'll do it again. They might be in the doghouse for now.
Do you take perverse enjoyment in my affection for KT Rolster?
You're the person who, like, every single fucking time CJ Blaze went out in like the round of 8 was like, there'll always be maybe next season. Now it's like, I'll bide my time, motherfucker. Until I was like Tyrion in Game of Thrones, where he got really mad and he was like, one day all of you love will be ashes in your mouth. When he said that to Cersei, that's what I was waiting for, Monty.
Is this
and now my time's come?
Because I kept making fun of you for the KT Bullets bodying CJ Blaze.
Exactly.
Damn it.
But you know what, Monty?
I don't like it when it's this way around.
It was all worth it for that when Najin came and bodied the shit out of Katie Arrows. Oh, that was so glorious to see that, the pain. I can't even remember what your specific Kakao message was, but I could feel your pain, and I was like, suffer, baby, suffer. That's right. Feel all the pain directed back at you. Those are dark days, weren't they, Monty?
You're a sick fuck.
Yep, those are pretty dark days. So anyway, if you had to bet on any of these teams that are like the bottom 4 in Korea, can any of them actually go crazy and can Samsung actually break into like the top 4 to top 3? Is it doable if they went really nuts?
Ooh, if they went really nuts, yes, I think they could. But
who beyond Fury actually can do something in this team?
Kuve, surprisingly, has been playing very well. The upgrade that they made at the mid lane in terms of recruiting Crown, I think, was surprisingly effective. He's been much more versatile in the mid lane, holding his own. He absolutely put Easy Hoon in the dumpster.
He put the best player in the world in the dumpster?
I don't know. It doesn't seem possible, does it?
He put the best SK Telecom player in the dumpster?
The superior SK Telecom player, I know. Is your mind breaking with shock right now?
He put the lolesports.com future GOAT into the dumpster. How could he do such a thing? Well, by the power invested in me in LoL Esports, that makes him the new best player in the world. Okay.
It's the linear title belt,
yep,
right?
Exactly. The linear title belt. He's got it.
So I do think they have some really good pieces to build around right now. And the other thing that I really like about Samsung is they've actually been showing some really cool compositions, and they've been following through on their team strategies. The problem is that every match Samsung has like a really cool strategy. They play it in game 1, they win, and then the team bans out some picks, and they're like, well, what the fuck do we do now?
So what you're telling me is that in LCS, Samsung would be rocking the top of the league right now?
Yeah, I would actually.
In that format,
I think they'd be 3-1 under that format, actually.
See, that's the thing, folks. What happens is, if you get an ant infestation, or you get termites, or you get some sort of, what do you call it, like dry rot, obviously it gets to strike first. That's how you notice it's there. That's how you diagnose the symptoms that there's a problem. But then you don't just let it take over and rule the house, do you? You bring in the exterminator, he diagnoses what's wrong, he applies the counter and destroys it utterly, and at least beats it back each time, or just routes it completely. What you're doing in the West is, as soon as it strikes, you're like, well, you win that house, now on to the next house. Termites come along again, you're like, well, there's no such thing as a counter to termites, we don't play series here, mate. And so you let in termites, dry rot, and ants, like Unicorns of Love, like Gravity, like Dignitas, rule the house when you could just exterminate this scum completely. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying, right, is could you clean house, for fuck's sake?
I'm not sure I would go that far.
Cleanliness is next to godliness, Nick Allen.
They would be 3-2 under the current system.
Okay. Monty co-signed all of that.
No.
Using the logic of Redditors that by not explicitly shouting me down saying no, stop, I don't agree with this, here's a signed affidavit saying that these views do not represent me, you actually both co-sign it and probably prompted me to say all those things. Anyway,
the words might as well have been coming out of my mouth.
Exactly. This is going to be a short episode because, again, just because it's funny, Monty, even though they won MSI, we're actually going to, again, completely neglect the Chinese region, actually because we're running short on time this time.
We are running short on time, but also, I don't want to talk about China until Dandy and Insect get out of the top lane. Fucking stop it, China.
And on that note, that's the end. Oh, wait, one sec. Before that's the end, I will just say, because I should have just done it at the beginning, but whatever. It's too late. I'm not editing this one. So if you want to play some fantasy League of Legends, perhaps you could play it on Alpha Draft. Last week, they gave out over $150,000, and one person won over $11,000, and Monte won some money. And that's the end of my advert for Alpha Draft, alphadraft.com. If you want, sign up with like a question mark at the. Actually, I'll put it in the description. You can sign. I'll give you a choice. In fact, if you want to play some Alpha Draft with me and Monte, you can choose which of the two of us you'd like to give some sign-up bonus money by clicking on the referral link and signing up to. So you might do it for Monte. Listen, Monte's rich as fuck. I'm telling you now, I'm like a struggling artist out there. Like I could, and I'm shit at betting, so I could really use that money. But I just told you Monte's winning money anyway. So I'm not going to tell you who to sign up for or to do it at all. But if you were to, I'm just saying, are you a good person or not? Do you like to share the wealth? So yeah, do that.
And that's how Thorin emotionally manipulates you.
That's how I get into the black, Monte. Okay, that's it. The end.